Too many vegans have. Did it start? I see the stream. Oh, yes, it did. Here we are. All right. Well, we've got another installment in the FarmKind saga. We've got an op-ed published in the Daily Mail by Tony Vanelli about the campaign. So we'll get into read that in a little bit. This one's quite a long interview. I guess I do want to watch this, though. This came out a month ago, so it's pretty recent. This is one of the FarmKind co-founders. And it's an hour and a half long, so it should be pretty interesting. I've not seen it before. I think we'll start with this. I'll be speaking to some of the FarmKind team next week. Not this guy, I don't think, but Tony and Tom. I think that's the plan.
The thing about factory farming is it's actually entirely solvable. It's not this like force of nature, this thing that's happening to us like malaria or poverty or a tsunami. It's a man-made system that we invented less than 100 years ago. We chose to create it and we can just as easily choose to do otherwise.
G'day humans, welcome to the safe space for dangerous ideas. It's one of the most uncomfortable conversations that many of us wrestle with inside our heads when we sit down to a delicious meal of animal flesh. What's the provenance of the animal? What kind of life did it?
Guess these guys are both Australian, huh? Kind of quirky. I'm pretty sure Aidan lives in the UK. I've met him and Tom. But yeah, here we go.
Lead? Should we feel guilty about the process that we're all implicated in? Well, one of the least effective ways to address cruelty against animals is wagging your finger at people and preaching at them to go vegan. That is the conclusion of today's guest. Apparently it does.
One of the least effective ways. Is that something they would say? Maybe. I mean, yeah, as I've said, I think that the FarmKind guys are personally vegan. They can't be that public about this in this campaign, obviously.
Doesn't really help if you're ethically conflicted about industrial animal farming to just go cold turkey and try not to eat any animals or eggs or milk. Look, it works for a vanishingly small minority of people, but it obviously isn't the way to enact change on a massive scale. So Aidan Alexander, today's guest, co-founded a non-profit that donates to a small basket of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the argument is basically correct. I'll show you a graph that I posted on LinkedIn of some diet data that came out recently. This is from the UK. Very gradual upward trend in meat-free diets, including vegan diets. This data just came out, I think yesterday, or the day before yesterday. It was looking pretty good up until the 2024 data, and then last year they all showed drops. Veganism dropped from 5% the previous year to 2%, but rebounded this year to 3%. And the trend over time is gradually up, but it's very, very gradual. So, yeah, I mean, as I've said here, the big picture does show a significant increase in veganism over time, but it's at a snail's pace. Diet change is happening, but it can't be our only tool to help animals.
Of effective charities, which lobby and create opportunities for companies and for governments to implement cruelty-free options for millions of farmed animals every year. This is a fascinating conversation about essentially how we can enact systemic change in order to improve the welfare of really some horrifyingly barbaric practices. And don't worry, this is not an episode where we spend an endless amount of time talking about gruesome ways that animals are treated in factory farms. In fact, I'm the one who has to generally encourage Aidan to even go there because he's so reluctant to talk about the problems and so enthusiastic to talk about positive solutions. But if you care about pigs being locked in crates and hens enduring miserable, painful lives just in order to shave a few cents off the cost of a pound of flesh that you buy at a supermarket or a grocery store, this episode is your practical solution. The organisation that Aidan co-founded is called FarmKind. It's independently funded through philanthropy, so all of the money goes to the charities. They don't skim any off the top. And until the end of this year, until the end of 2025, they're doing a deal for our listeners where if you donate at FarmKind and use the code JOSH, they will match 1-for-1 using their other philanthropic funds to effectively double the impact of every dollar that you donate. If this sounds a little bit like an advertisement, it's not. I'm not getting paid any money for this. I just really believe that fixing factory farming is a gigantic problem and a pretty easy problem to solve with a lot of low-hanging fruit that Aidan is helping to identify. And to make...
I'm not sure who this guy is, but I don't think he's a vegan person, is he? Which would be good in this context, right? That's kind of the point for them to try and reach out beyond the immediate vegan circle. 600 views.
Change on. So go to farmkind.giving and use the code JOSH before the new year if you want to double your contribution. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Aidan and I talk about why animal rights activism hasn't worked and the problems of preaching veganism and the different sentience of various different species, whether we should care about prawns and shrimps less than we care about cows, the strangely elevated status of cats and dogs in the moral imagination of humankind, the negative externalities of industrial agriculture and the subsidies therein, and most importantly, practical ways that we all can fix this big but thankfully relatively easy to solve problem. Hope you enjoy as much as I did. The one and only Aidan Alexander. So the idea that a lot of people have about eating meat is like, yes, we know that there are bad things that go on in factory farms, but we can sort of consciously try to be a little bit more mindful about where we source our meat from. Eating meat is a natural part of the ecosystem. Animals eat other animals. Humans are animals. We're omnivores. There's nothing...
If I'm right and the FarmKind guys are themselves vegan, then he must be so triggered right now by like straight off the bat you get like the Carnus bingo. But he's trying to not frame it as a vegan thing, right? He's an ex-ABC journalist, huh? No way. Okay, I thought this had a bit of production value, right? He's obviously got a studio here, proper mics and everything. The guy came in. That's always cost some money. But that's cool. Okay, nice. Not vegan as far as I know. Okay, interesting.
There's almost something like hyper-technical about the idea of extracting ourselves from the food system and saying like, we're not going to be part of the natural order of animals eating other animals. We're going to think ourselves out of that. What's your response to that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here to talk about factory farming, but like the thing I want to make very clear, because I think a lot of people, as soon as you raise this topic, they start thinking about diet. I'm not here to tell anybody what to eat. I think this is
yeah, exactly as I said. There's like a little bit of a disclaimer because he's about to say, well, I disagree with everything you've just said about being part of it, but he doesn't want it to turn into a vegan debate. So it's like, I'm here to talk about factory farming. I'm not here to tell anyone what to eat. But yeah, he must have been triggered in that opening salvo. The guy said like 4 different Carnus bingo things.
a distraction, actually. I think telling people to go vegan is a really bad strategy for fixing factory farming, and we have like far better alternatives. So yeah, mostly the...
Yeah, that's okay. So he does kind of say that. I mean, I'm somewhat sympathetic to that view insofar as we might be inclined to basically exclude people from the movement for not being vegan. Like I saw some chat about, you know, these charities shouldn't accept the donations if it's coming from meat eaters. It's like, are we trying to just make factory farming go on forever with this kind of strategic thought? We shouldn't accept money from meat eaters. I mean, come on. That's the only way we're going to ever actually stand a chance of doing something about this. So yeah, I think some people do have to get real with that a little bit. Actually, now that I'm triggered and talking about this, where's the thing that I posted with Ricky Gervais? Here it is. Some of the comments on this were just mental. I posted about is Ricky Gervais 2.0, my video in the vegan subreddit, and it got downvoted, annoyingly. Quite a bit by the looks of it. It's at 48.9%, so it must have gone up and down a bit. Although it says, okay, that's, I guess, net upvotes. So usually what happens, it gets to 0 and then it's not, you know, it doesn't come up on the feed. So you don't typically get posts that are heavily downvoted with negative numbers, right? But some of the comments on this, fuck him, 17 upvotes. Gervais an ass, notably transphobic, etc. 43 upvotes. Shane Ricky Gervais, who went on a rant criticising Hannah Einbinder for using her stage to speak out for Palestine against ICE while receiving an Emmy. It's like such unnecessarily divisive stuff on a post about him giving a load of money to vegan charities or to animal charities. There's a ton of back and forth here. I commented, the livestock industries absolutely do not want us to admire or celebrate people giving a lot of money to animal charities. Seeing people downvote this and comment with textbook wedge issues really makes me think about the undercover meat industry operatives known to be in this sub. Someone comments something about farm kind, that becomes a whole thing. But I mean, is this not what you would do if you were trying to make sure that no money goes into the animal movement? Like, hey, but the post about a celebrity giving money to the animal movement, let's immediately comment like all of his most controversial takes and things that he said that's going to get him cancelled and all this. Like, goodness me, why would you do this? I don't know. I mean, this just made me strongly think of the sabotage posting in the vegan subreddit. This is either sabotage or just like heroically stupid. It's just literally driving money away from the movement. Anyway.
Focus on diet is distracting, is what my response would be. There's better things we could do. And I think that it kind of mostly backfires telling people to change their diet for a bunch of reasons. In fact, this has been my kind of hobby horse I've been trying to convince other people working on this issue about for a couple of years now.
But why are you fatalistic about not getting people to change their diet? I know lots of people who've gone vegetarian or vegan because of either the climate implications or the moral considerations or the health implications.
Yeah, look, I'm not fatalistic about it. And I think there has been like times when it's been particularly in vogue, even like especially as a health trend, veganism over the past few years. But if you kind of zoom out, you look at like Gallup polls, the rates of veganism have been 1% for decades. They're not moving. This is not working overall. And it's not to say that going vegan isn't a great way to do something about this issue. It is. But the point is that we shouldn't be myopically focused on this one issue, that there's just one thing that you can do about it. It is, in fact, not the biggest thing you can do about it. And it's like one of the hardest things.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I mean, he says that not that going vegan isn't good, it is good. But yeah, the main point is that it's a distraction. Like, to be honest, given that there are way more impactful things that you can do, it's a bit mental that one of the hardest things that you can do, which has relatively little impact, is the main focus of the movement. I guess that's kind of their point. I mean, if they're right about the empirics of how many animals you can help with either method and how difficult either method is, I think that's exactly the point, right? We're going to read the op-ed in a little bit.
most people find to do about it. So like, why is that all we can talk about?
Right. What's the biggest, easiest thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to, like, I'm a big proponent of the fact that there are a lot of issues that are competing for our time and energy and like moral energy. And so we have to prioritize. And so I like to think about things on kind of like a 2x2, where on one axis you have like, how easy is it? And on the other axis, how impactful is it? And veganism, you know,
I had this graph in one of my early Vegan 2.0 videos.
very impactful. Most people find not so easy. Posting something on social media, very easy, not so impactful. I think one of the things that sits at the best kind of sweet spot of the two is donating to some of the organizations that are working at a systemic level to actually fix this issue.
How do you fix it without eating less meat?
Yeah, I mean, so what it depends what the it is here. And the thing that I would like to stop is factory farming. And you can be, you don't have to be against animal farming to be against factory farming. And the thing about factory farming is it's actually entirely solvable, because it's not
He's very artfully not said whether he's a vegan.
just like a force of nature, this thing that's happening to us, like malaria or poverty or a tsunami. Like, it's a man-made system that we invented less than 100 years ago. And we chose to create it, and we can just as easily choose to do otherwise by changing a few practices. And yes, I can hear you thinking there are like a bunch of very powerful vested interests that want to keep things the way that they are. And yet, advocates have found strategies that really do bring them to heel a bit. They're just like woefully underfunded.
Well, there is the problem of vested interest, but there's also the moral problem that people who argue for cheap meat say that it's a priority for poor families to have the ability to feed themselves protein, and meat would be a lot more expensive if it wasn't factory farmed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a sense in which factory farming makes animal products cheaper, because what it does is it takes real costs, like the cost to animals' welfare, the cost to public health, the cost of the environment. These are externalities, they're not built into the cost of the product, and it will trade off as much of those things as possible to save you a few cents on your product. And there are people that struggle to put food on the table, and if the only thing that they can afford is factory farm meat, then they got to do what they got to do. But that's not everyone. And I think a lot of people, when they consider the full cost of the product, including some of those externalities versus the alternatives actually look pretty good. And because it's actually really cheap to make things a lot more.
Yeah, definitely like some sort of economics background for these guys, talking about the negative externalities and how they're, we're all paying the cost of the pollution and the public health problems and so on. And they are not. He's very artfully avoiding the contentious things. I'm sure when you're doing this and going, with the mission of we're going to communicate with meat eaters about this effective solution that you can do, it's very, very difficult to not get dragged into arguing with the sort of anti-vegan talking points that come up about it's natural and it's all that poor people can afford and so on. Like, it's you must want to chase after most of these.
More humane. Well, I can speak about it at a macro level, because one of the ways you can achieve this, right? We globally spend $800 billion a year on agricultural subsidies, and most of that is going to...
Is that an Australian figure or a US figure? A global figure,
global figure, $800 billion a year. And it would cost less than $10 billion to completely transition away from battery cages for hens in the US, and less than that still to get rid of gestation crates for pigs. So
right,
we
don't
even
even
need to
would
spend...
be much more expensive.
Sorry?
Then eggs would be much more expensive. It's cheap to implement, but then it's expensive to continue, isn't it? It talked to a New Zealander about how much eggs cost after they got rid of battery cage hens. And
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but on a unit basis, I don't think the cost difference is that high. And if you can pay the upfront cost of the change this way, not by paying more, but just by...
This is an interesting part of it, because I am always talking about this, how if you implement cage-free systems, it increases the cost curve such that it becomes more expensive and there's fewer animals farmed. And when I was looking at some research on this the other day, it's so interesting because it seems that the welfare reform advocates often want to argue that it doesn't increase the cost. Because they are arguing against the position that, that this is needed to make food affordable for the general public. In my case, I'm arguing that it does increase the cost, which is usually what the producers are saying as justification to not do it, basically. But I'm, my job is communicating with other vegans to explain this is why you should get on board supporting animal reforms, animal welfare reform stuff. It's not helpful to have half of the movement pulling against these reforms, because actually they're going to make fewer animals get farmed as well. But yeah, there's a lot that has been written on that empirically one way or another. I'll probably have a look into that in more detail at some point.
Redistributing how we already subsidize agriculture to subsidize the things that we want.
It seems to me kind of like a priori true, because I came across some articles arguing that because it reduces mortality and improves animal health, it might actually even reduce costs. And you're thinking, well, if that was the case, they would just already be doing it, right? They're presumably doing it as cheaply as possible. If there was the case that you can reduce your costs reliably by doing it some other way, then you're just going to do that, aren't you?
Which is transitioning to more humane products. It really.
I mean, wait, the cost has to be more, because the whole point of the battery cage is that you can cram lots and lots of hens into a particular amount of square
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
footage. So if you've got fewer hens because they're living a more tolerable life and they're wandering around clucking happily in the sunshine,
Yeah,
there is more cost associated.
absolutely. As I say, the way it's been able to be made as cheap as it is through trading off externalities for real financial costs. But it is more expensive than I think people realize.
Right. Okay. So what are the main practices that are going on? In fact, like, what do we mean by factory farming in its most demonic incarnation?
It is more expensive, but not by that much.
You want to get rid of?
Yeah, good question. But I also don't want to dwell on the depressing stuff for too long, because I think it's actually a really hopeful story here. But like, people throw around this word factory farming. What does it mean? There is no like technical agreed consensus definition. It's kind of a know it when you see it sort of thing. And some of the hallmarks of a factory farm is when the animals spend their entire life confined indoors. They never see the sun. They never touch the ground. They never breathe fresh air. Often confined in incredible density. They're selectively bred to grow unnaturally fast, to the point that they, like, if you think of chickens, they can often like barely walk. I don't want to dwell on the details too much. I think
I think you have to in order to make the moral case.
Well,
I mean, you can't make a moral case without
but the thing about
saying what you're trying to reform.
Absolutely.
Hey, humans,
That's interesting. He actually did kind of have to push him towards talking about it more. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're trying really hard to not have it come across as asking them for diet change, which is good. I think, that is part of the strategy. Presumably you have to make the moral case still to compel people to donate as well. I think they're absolutely right about donating being a good, like, low effort, high impact, basically. Is the highest impact of the things that I estimated, more so than convincing other people or doing kind of diet change activism, or even doing the organised fast action network. Donating can just, you're creating so much opportunity when you donate to these animal organisations for them to do stuff.
Putting your pants on is a lot like using a VPN. It keeps your private stuff private, and if you don't get around to doing it before you need to, you find yourself unexpectedly exposed. Hallelujah! Surfshark VPN is giving you 4 extra months of their military-grade encryption at surfshark.com/JoshS, or you can use the code JoshS at checkout. Without a private virtual network, you are a sitting duck for snoopers and trackers and identity theft and fraud, especially on public Wi-Fi, which I use quite a lot at libraries and at airports and such, which is one reason I use Surfshark VPN. That's not the only reason, though, the privacy stuff. Speaking of airports, you should take a look at what happens when you turn on Surfshark VPN and you start browsing flights and hotel reservations from different regions. There are location-based price differences Hotels and airlines and travel booking sites offer different prices to different countries. And with Surfshark VPN, you can be wherever you want to be, regardless of where you are. A Surfshark VPN also enables you to stream your favorite shows or access websites that are geo-blocked from the region you're actually in. With Surfshark, you can break through all the online barriers and access content from all over the world. So don't let online threats catch you off guard. Take control of your online security with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/JoshS or use the code JoshS at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN.
But the thing about factory farming as an issue is I don't actually think
Oh dear, they messed up the audio on that at the end of that ad. Damn. We watched the ad out of respect because we're stealing content here, but
we do need to make the moral case because almost everybody agrees that this thing is bad, right? Like, this is the frustrating thing about factory farming. As I mentioned before, it's entirely solvable.
Hey, Andrew, good to see you.
And also, we all agree that it's bad. Basically, everybody loves animals. And if you do surveys, 75% of Americans, this survey that the Sentience Institute ran, found that 75% of Americans are uncomfortable with factory farming and, in fact, say that it's one of the most pressing issues of our time.
Well, it depends. I think this is why the details are important. It does depend how you ask the question. I think if you ask people, are you in favor of industrial agriculture that makes meat cheap for working families, then they would be supportive of that.
Yeah.
If you said, are you in favor of chopping the beaks off little chickens, I don't know, to fit them in cages and electrocuting them to have...
Even with that framing, I wouldn't be surprised if you get a lot of people saying no. I think most people have at least glimpsed some of the factory farm or slaughterhouse footage. They know what they know what it is that they don't want to look at. So I think even with that framing, you're going to get a good chunk of people saying, no, we shouldn't be doing it. But yeah, he's not wrong. Obviously, it affects it to some extent how you ask it.
Then to have eggs, then the valence becomes different. So I think you're right that a lot of people have this vague idea that they're opposed to factory farming. But one of the reasons why you have, for example, agricultural ag-gag laws in the States, which actually criminalize whistleblowing in concentrated animal feeding operations, so that you can be penalized for taking a hidden camera into a factory farm, is precisely because the industry knows that if the reality did get out, then people would be even more against it than they already are.
Yeah.
So I do think it's worth putting some flesh on the bones, if you'll pardon the metaphor, of what it is that is wrong with it. Because I don't see anything obviously wrong with introducing efficiencies into a traditional farm, even if they include a slightly deleterious life for the inhabitants of that farm.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's the torturing of the animals bit.
Yes,
that's
the bit that we object to.
That you object to. So we need to know what that is.
And I think you're right to point out that how you frame the question makes what you make salient for people makes a huge difference to what their answers are. And so if you speak in generalities, you might hear that 75% of people oppose it. A majority even would support a ban on factory farming. But what does that mean? And if you get into more specific practices, the level of support actually goes up. So 88% of Americans agree that confining pigs in these cages where they can't turn around or walk is unacceptable. And try and find something else that 88% of Americans agree upon today. Like, this is an uncanny level of support.
And these sow cages. These are. But they're not. They don't exist in Europe, right?
Yeah, for sure, Andrew. There's some good survey data that I've seen. I think it's from the Sentience Institute, where they ask people. It's something like. Let me not say the wrong numbers. Something like 50%, 55%. Think that most farmed animals are treated well, and then if you ask about what about the animals that you eat, then it goes up to like 80%. People think, it's everyone else eating the factory farmed animals, right? It's not me.
Been outlawed there? Is that the kind?
Oh, have they been outlawed? So there's two types of ways that pigs are confined in cages at different points in their life. You're making me dwell on the bad stuff, Josh. That's not what I'm wanting to do. One is called, a gestation crate, and this is when the pig is pregnant. This is the especially small one where it can barely move at all. And then once the pig gives birth to piglets, they then have the luxury of being upgraded to an ever so slightly larger type of cage called a farrowing crate, where they do the breastfeeding of the young piglets. And when those young piglets are grown up, then they get put back into cage one again, and on it goes for the rest of their life. And I heard an anecdote from somebody that I know that they grew up on a farm, and they know many people that work in this sector, and they had the opportunity to go and visit one of these farms, and you see the way that the pig fights as hard as it can to not be confined again in this tiny cage. I don't think there's any question.
God, that's fucking sad, isn't it? Yeah, he didn't want to go there.
Whether it's suffering in there.
Right. And pigs are quite smart and quite sociable, and they like rummaging around, and so they go kind of crazy in these places, right? And they gnaw their teeth on the bars and like.
Yes, and then so yeah, we in factory farming, they often try and solve some of the problems that they create, but these solutions create further problems. So they're confining pigs that these very complex animals that want to look after their young. Imagine how traumatizing it would be to be pinned down and be unable to care to your young. They want to socialize. They don't want to be confined with so many of their peers. And so this leads to aggression, which leads to tail biting. And so what do? They now cut off the pig's tails without anesthetic. So often the so-called solutions to some of the problems that factory farming causes just create further problems.
Right. Okay. And one of those crates, I don't remember which one, is on its way out in a lot of jurisdictions.
Yes.
I don't think it exists in Australia. It certainly doesn't. One of them don't in the EU.
In Australia, that both are totally legal, as far as I'm aware. There are a lot of pushes to, and for example, in like California, these are banned. There are several states in the US where they are banned. I think in the UK they are banned. There's a lot. There are many different practices to try. It's like a game of whack-a-mole to try and knock out across the world. And
and of course the problem is that in the people who are buying most of the pork and bacon in California are probably buying it from the Midwest, where the crates are in existence, and they're unaware that they're eating that. Similarly, in Australia, you often see. Try finding Australian pig flesh in a supermarket. You go in and you see a packet, and it'll have a big Australian flag on it, and you'll look at the back of it, and it'll say made from at least 8% Australian ingredients, which is the water. It comes from a pig that was raised in Asia or something.
And there's such a double standard on the part of the factory farming industry when it comes to labeling.
Is that real? They put 8% Australian fluid is the water. Is that real? I've never heard that one before. That's mental.
Because when you want to sell a plant-based burger, there's this law that's being passed in Europe right now that bans the use of the word burger to describe something that wouldn't contain beef, for example, the use of the word.
Yeah, I got kicked back in the end. When he did this interview, it was on the cards, but they fumbled it. So we still have our plant-based burgers for now. Not that we are part of Europe now, but yeah.
Word milk, because they're saying, the people will be confused. They need to know, as if anyone has ever been confused.
Right,
about
whether almond milk comes from a beaver.
Exactly, and yet when you say to them, to the industry, okay, we used to give us country of origin labeling, suddenly this is far too hard, and obviously, people aren't confused about this. So there's a lot of having it both ways. So
that's pigs. Anything else before we get off the macabre and onto your optimistic, sunny vision of a glorious future where lion lies with lamb and we all drink from rivers of honey?
Okay, if you're pushing me to dwell on some negative ones.
What about chickens? You mentioned factory hens, because this is another one of the things about vegetarianism, right? One thing that I find interesting is that a lot of people who have a problem with eating meat will start by not eating red meat. And they'll say, I'm only going to eat chicken, or maybe they only eat fish, but they eat milk and eggs.
Yeah.
But if you're looking strictly from an ethical perspective, not necessarily from a health one, if you just buy a cheap pint of milk and a regular, dozen eggs, it could be argued that the suffering that went into the eggs and the production of the eggs and the milk is worse than the suffering of a steak.
Absolutely.
Especially if it comes from a cow who is wandering around in the sunshine eating grass.
Yeah, I think that's not just arguable. I think that's the case.
Yep, agreed. Yep. part of the small body problem, and then partly, most cows are not factory farmed, certainly in the UK, and I think in Australia as well, whereas most chickens and pigs will be. So yeah, beef probably far less suffering attached than eggs on average.
For like two main reasons. One is just the nature of how those animals are farmed. So the life of a factory farm chicken is far worse than the life of a cow. One of the biggest drivers of this that I think people don't know about, I'll try and focus on things people are less likely to know about because they'll be a bit more interesting, is the kind of genetic aspect of it. Because we've selectively bred these chickens, they're all like genetically near identical at this point, to grow so fast that they're there's two issues with this. One is their lives are brutally short. These are babies, essentially, by the time they reach the end of their life. But also they're growing so fast that their bones can't really support them. They can barely stand. They live with bone fractures as a result of their own weight, panting to try and breathe. They're basically morbidly obese, right? And there's kind of nothing you can do in terms of the treatment of the animal that can solve for this. This is like genetically baked in suffering at this point, which is why some charities are doing really great work to push corporations to commit to phasing out these fast-growing breeds and use more humane breeds. That's just one example. I'll throw out a couple others that.
And the reason why we've done that is because they have gigantic breasts and people like eating, and so you just get more meat off them, right?
Basically, yes. If you as the factory farming industry put zero value on animal welfare, then you will trade off infinite amounts of it to save any amount on your
Didn't even snigger when he said gigantic breasts.
operating costs, and so that's exactly what they do.
I mean, you can even tell that just by looking at what a free-range chicken costs. I mean, I don't really buy chicken anymore because to buy a chicken that actually led a healthy life, it's $35 for a chicken in Australia, and the ones that you get at the supermarket.
Well, fair play to this guy. I mean, if that's true, he's informed on the issues. He knew about chickens being worse treated than cows, and obviously cared enough to do this debate. I think that this is kind of fits the bill for someone who's sympathetic but is not a vegan and therefore is able to communicate with that crowd, right?
Market are $6. It's like, 6 times the price.
Yes.
For an actual,
I mean, a big part of this is
free-range chicken.
Is subsidies as well, like going in the wrong direction, right? Because the more factory farmed, the more intensively farmed an animal is, the more they're just being fed grain, basically. And grain is the biggest beneficiary of these large agricultural subsidies. And you kind of don't reap the benefits of that if you are not feeding your animals grain.
Right.
So this is one of the ways that subsidies can work in a negative way. But to your previous point as to like why a lot of people start with red meat if they are doing diet change, which I stress is not the most important thing. Let's not focus on diet change. But people start with red meat, and this can often be perhaps a mistake because, one, the smaller animals like chickens are often treated way worse, but most importantly, they are just smaller. Think about how many animals you need to be farmed kind of per serve for your chicken burger versus your beef burger. So this is called the small animal replacement problem, where people replace, let's say, beef with smaller things like chickens and fish, and this can actually be not great from an animal welfare perspective.
Right, in the sense that if you take the sort of experience of the animal as being one unit of sentience, then your moral, the kind of karma that you own from sitting down and eating an entire chicken, well, you own the karma of that entire chicken's life and death. Whereas
I wonder if Aidan's going to say this. I think that's kind of the wrong metric ultimately, and some people have been discussing this in my Discord. There's going to be a multiplier for how complex that experience is. Sentience presumably is not a binary 1 or 0 kind of variable. There ought to also be a multiplier for how long they live as well. Because I think chickens go to slaughter at about 6 weeks, and for cows it's more like 2 years, I believe. And then, of course, there's a multiplier for how they're treated during that time as well. So yeah, counting the animals is not quite as straightforward as that, really. But that is it's the most intuitive way to talk about it. That's what I've tended to talk about in terms of Vegan 2.0. But I think the proper metric that you would want is like sentience weighted suffering days. I think is one of the ones Brian Tomasic has. Something like that.
Because if you sit down and you eat some 4 steaks and your whole family only gets through less than a kilo of steak, then you can do that on probably 50 nights of the year, and that's only the karma of one.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't put it in such karmic terms, but the point is that the smaller the animal, the more animals are farmed per meal, and if
the more of it you eat, the more of it you eat.
Right. There's a new trend in health and nutrition that has captured the public. Whoops. Okay, I'm gonna go and say goodnight to my wife. Watch this. I'll be back in 5. Imagination and had plenty of airtime in recent years.
There's been a lot of debate around the world about ultra-processed foods.
Ultra-processed foods, the high in fats, starches, sugars, and additives.
Homemade and free from UPF. That's food which has been ultra-processed.
Ultra-processed foods are the scary new food category that we're all being told we should avoid. But what if this idea that ultra-processed foods are necessarily unhealthy is a total myth? First, let's look at what ultra-processed foods actually are. Ultra-processed foods are those in Category 4 of what's called the NOVA framework. Before you think that NOVA is an acronym for something scientific, it's not. It simply means new in Portuguese. The system was first invented in Brazil, and indeed it is pretty new. It was only invented in 2009. The definition of ultra-processed foods is a bit amorphous. Sometimes it has to do with having a certain number of ingredients, having ingredients that are difficult to pronounce, being wrapped in plastic, being produced by multinational companies, being profitable, being aggressively marketed, or being produced using methods that are not available in typical domestic settings. What it doesn't have to do with is health or nutrition. In fact, early definitions of ultra-processed foods were explicit in saying that this framework was not about nutrition and was not intended to be used as such. It's no wonder then that the USDA were able to design a diet which met all nutritional requirements and was made up of 91% ultra-processed foods. Think about it. Some of the foods being described here are pretty much the healthiest things that you can consume. Protein powder, ultra-processed food. Vitamin pills, ultra-processed food. Baked beans, whole grain bread, and even infant formula. These are all products which fall into this category called ultra-processed foods, but are by no metrics unhealthy. And there's one type of food in particular that has been heavily associated with this ultra-processed foods category, which is actually healthier than the food it replaces. I'm talking about plant-based meat. Despite their membership in the scary ultra-processed foods category, plant-based meat alternatives are, on average, healthier than the meat they replace. Let's look at a Beyond Burger, for example. Compared to a Tesco beef burger, a Beyond Burger has 20% more fibre, 30% fewer calories, 41% less fat, and 68% less saturated fat. That means that it cuts down on the type of fat known to cause heart disease by more than 2/3. In a paper I wrote a couple of years ago, I caveated these advantages by saying that some plant-based meat products are lower in protein, iron, and B12, and that some could be higher in salt. So I was genuinely surprised when I found out that the Beyond Burger versus a beef burger won on all of these metrics too. Compared to Tesco beef burgers, Beyond Burgers are 19% lower in salt, 63% higher in B12, and contain over twice as much iron. Now, protein per 100 grams was slightly higher in the beef burger compared to the Beyond Burger, but the beef burgers contained so much fat that as a percentage of calories, protein was actually 22% higher in the Beyond Burger. This is pretty typical for a lot of plant-based meat products. They're very often lower in calorie density and lower in saturated fat, whilst being higher in fibre. Even the caveats that I used to make about other nutrients are becoming less relevant as products reformulate and get healthier over time. It's no wonder that there are now randomized crossover trials showing that people lose weight and lower their LDL cholesterol levels when they eat plant-based meat instead of meat from animals. So why is there such a vibe that plant-based meat is unhealthy because it's ultra-processed? Well, it's simple. The meat industry paid for it. This is an actual advertisement run on behalf of the meat industry during the Super Bowl in 2020.
Can you please define that?
Methylcellulose. It's a chemical laxative that is also used in synthetic meat.
Subtle, right? And Super Bowl ads aren't cheap. the meat industry literally paid millions of dollars to indoctrinate us all into thinking that plant-based meat is ultra-processed and therefore unhealthy. As we've seen, in reality, the opposite is true. So ironically, this campaign, which appeals to fears about healthiness, is actually going to make the population less healthy. Fewer calories, less saturated fat, and more fiber are all things which would indisputably make the populations of developed countries healthier. Even occasionally swapping out meat for plant-based meat could significantly decrease the rate of obesity, heart disease, and other diseases associated with the overconsumption of calories and saturated fat. But wait, wasn't there that one study linking processed plant foods to higher risk of heart disease? Well, not exactly. In 20... Hey Andrew, not sure. I haven't actually been before to Vegan Camp Out. But yeah, maybe this is the year I do something about it. I'm going to VARC. You going to VARC in Manchester? 24, this study was published in the Lancet Regional Health, showing that consumption of processed plant foods was associated with an increased risk of heart disease. I was about to debunk the heck out of that, but let's get back to this.
The more animals you eat for the same amount of food.
Yes, got it.
Yeah, but can I talk about why telling people to go vegan is a distraction?
Go on.
Yeah, well, basically, I think that I've thought a lot about this because the people that have been trying to address factory farming, this has been the main thing they've been saying for decades. Go vegan, subtext, go vegan or you're evil, right? This is bad because it triggers what I call the 3 Ds. The first of these is denial. When you tell somebody to go vegan, you trigger this emotional tension that we look for
Aye, that sounds like trouble, Andrew.
a way to resolve. And the most common way of doing that is by denying the issue and by looking away from it entirely. And this emotional tension I speak about is because of something psychologists call the meat paradox. Have you heard of the meat paradox? So basically, this is like 2 facts that are true at the same time. On one hand, we love animals, hate to see them suffer, and yet animals are suffering to create the products that end up on our shelves and that we end up buying. And when people make this salient to us, because we do a pretty good job of not thinking about it most of the time, that's cognitive dissonance and it doesn't feel so good, right? And I think an example that brings this to life for me, do you remember in 2022, there was this Premier League footballer, Kurt Zouma, who got in trouble for kicking a cat?
Yeah.
Does this ring a bell? Yeah. This guy, not the sharpest tool in the shed, apparently. His brother videoed him kicking a cat and they uploaded it. I'm not sure what they were thinking there. And as you can expect, there's like national outrage, international outrage. The French sports minister.
True, Stephen, yes. They're going to be doing that in the UK, bringing in the compulsory production system labelling, I guess it's called. But it's basically factory farm labelling, factory farm disclosure.
Was denouncing this guy, and
while he was eating horse on live television. No, just a joke about the French eating horse.
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, ultimately, this guy was sentenced to community service, given a massive fine. He was banned from playing football, and on the same day he was sentenced, hundreds of millions of animals are experiencing far worse than a cat being kicked, and this doesn't get any media coverage. This is just another Wednesday. This is the meat paradox, and when it's brought to light by telling somebody to go vegan, they then want to do something about it because if your listeners right now might be feeling some of these not so nice feelings that this conjures. And so how can we resolve the paradox? There's 2 options. One is change our actions so they're in line with our values. And if you're telling somebody that the only way they can do that is to go vegan, that's a tall order. The other option is just make excuses. And there are a few quite great ways we can do this. One is we can say, well, look, it's just not
Yeah, you said a bunch of them at the start of this interview, actually, if you remember.
so bad, and then systematically ignore all the photos and videos of what's really going on that would force us to conclude, hey, actually this is quite bad. Or we can make arguments about well, look, this thing, I agree that this is what's happening on the farm, but that's justified. And this is actually quite a hard conclusion to argue for, and so people end up making some pretty crazy arguments, like you can sum a couple of the worst ones up as but lions eat meat, or but plants feel pain, are some classic bad arguments. And the third and maybe most common way that people can deny the issue is just to say, yeah, obviously this is bad, but
I feel like you awkwardly remember that the guy started by by saying that other animals eat each other. There must have been a little bit of an awkward moment there. Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, Stephen. I think probably I think it has done. I mean, yeah, the rate of cigarette smoking has gone way down. Let's have a look at that. Cigarette smoking over time. Let's say UK. Who's got a good graph of this? This is Office for National Statistics, is it? What's the blue here? Smokers who have quit. Current smokers. Current smokers. Okay, this is proportion of those who have ever smoked. Can we get number of smokers? Is this the way that you would want to do it? Proportion of current smokers? Seems to be how everyone's reporting it. But anyway, look, we got all these down lines. We got all these downward trends. Cigarette smoking is something that we've been able to do something about quite well, but it's kind of vaping's going way up, but that's going to be way less bad for people's health, at least. Hey, Rebecca. Do you know if the feud between Farmkind and Veganuary was staged? I saw someone from Farmkind saying it was an act that everyone was in on. Yeah, I think that they kind of thought that it was. Or they thought that basically they had told Veganuary that they were going to do the campaign. And I guess that they had said to them, like, you know, this is going to be an opportunity for you to make the case for veganism, and we think it can be kind of win-win. But they weren't really in on it to the same extent as we might have thought. They didn't get a chance to veto it. They were told this is going to happen and had a bit of time to prepare, but I don't think they were in on it, as some people were saying. Yeah, there's something I spoke to Jen Land about. I'm not sure how possible that could even be in practice, because if you're doing it in a medium-sized organization with like a couple of dozen employees, say, it's quite difficult to keep that secret from the public, but let everyone in the organization know about it. And if you can't let everyone in the organization know about it, then they're reading the same press as everyone else, and they're gonna, they caught strays. They caught strays.
But I don't buy these products. My products are humanely raised. And Sentience Institute survey finds that 75% of people say that they most
There you go. This is what I was talking about a minute ago.
buy humane products. This is in the US. And yet, only 1% of the animals are not factory farmed. And so,
Right.
statistically speaking, most of these people are in denial.
Right.
So
They're
yeah,
raising a lot of goats in their backyard, if that's the case.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, there are a couple of other ways that they do it, just to point out the kind
Yeah.
of tricks that people might hear or might find themselves doing. One way of aligning the dog-cat versus factory farm conclusion, which not very many people do, but which I've been known to do in the past, is just to say, well, we should treat all animals the way that we treat factory farmed animals,
Yes.
right? I mean, in fact, one reason why I've eaten dog in Southeast Asia and I've eaten whale in Norway is just because I feel like I would be a moral hypocrite if I had some repugnant objection to the way that they do it, when I'm actually okay with doing it to equally
Totally.
legitimate animals. If you wouldn't put dogs in those pig crates, then you shouldn't put pigs in them.
It's an interesting way to go with that, isn't it? That's not really what you hope when you give people that analogy. Like, eating pigs, not that much different from eating dogs. You're not really hoping for people to go, you're right, actually, I guess I will eat dogs. That's, it can backfire.
Them either. And if you do put pigs in them, then have a dog.
Exactly.
Okay.
I went through this exact same thought process because I was like in my 20s, like the typical meat eating, rugby playing bloke. But then when I first started contending with this issue, I said, well, yeah, the wrong thing is is having somebody else do my dirty work for me. If I'm willing to go out and do it, then it's fine, right?
Grab a crossbow.
Well, I contacted some farms to say, hey, can I come in when it's time for an animal at the end of their life? Can I be the one to do it? As you can imagine, not many people invited me onto their farms. But yeah, you're right. This is basically when the options you give people transform your lifestyle to do something that you don't find appealing and think is really hard, which is going vegan, or find an excuse, it's really not surprising that that's the thing that people do.
Yeah, I mean, the other way to elevate dogs and cats is I've heard, which I had a very long and unproductive, I think stoned probably argument with a guy in New Orleans of all places who was saying that the reason why it's bad to eat dogs and not bad to eat other animals is because dogs made a pact with humankind thousands of years ago, which was to be man's friend, and it's a betrayal of the long-standing friendship agreement, the unspoken agreement between canines and Homo sapiens to eat them because they are our sidekicks.
I
was like, yeah, but the individual pig who's being tortured doesn't know that he isn't to blame for the misfortune of not having been born into the species. It's a human sidekick.
I mean, why don't we give the pig the option of signing the friendship pact?
Yeah,
I reckon
exactly.
They would probably choose it, you know?
Right.
And nobody ever asked them. So I think telling people to go vegan, it triggers denial.
That's so based, Rebecca. Idea for Vegan 3.0, working to get more people to do Vegan 2.0. That's so true. That's so true. Exponential vegan. I'm going to get more people to go Vegan 3.0. Checkmate.
This is unhelpful if you want to solve a problem that most people want to solve. The second reason it's a really bad message is that it triggers despair. And I'm going to kind of like back.
It's kind of what FarmKind are doing in a way, right? Trying to create effective donors. It's so interesting. I often think of our efforts as somewhat parallel because they are branding and talking to meat eaters and saying, you know, do the donating, do the offsetting. Maybe that's a better strategy. Who knows? I don't think that you can really have like it seems like it would be harder to have a community based around that. It's kind of like in the Sandcastles blog, where he said you need, for the most part, the central people who are part of the movement and the activists basically are generally going to be vegan, and that's important beyond the immediate implications and for group cohesion and group identity and stuff like, you know, shared struggle and all this kind of thing. So that's the way that I'm looking at it, is definitely more, you know, you can relate to other vegans because you know that you have a lot of shared struggle, basically, right? The social side of it and everything else. But yeah, these guys are obviously going for a bigger potential market, but also presumably less engaged. I think that's why they're so hammer on the don't make it about going vegan thing. Because, yeah, they're right in terms of speaking to meat eaters and trying to get donations out of meat eaters. That is going to put people off straight away. I actually... Sounds almost as cool as my vegan 3.126 plan. Hey, if it's exponential like vegan takeoff like that, I'm up for it. People can compete. I'd be happy to be mogged on this. You know, this reminds me of a time when we did, this was back in my uni days, my second year of uni. I did a charity hitchhike to Amsterdam. And hitchhiking is hard, by the way. Have you ever done hitchhiking? It's like, yeah, fuck no one wants to pick you up. We were in service stations and going up to people and, you know, asking if they can give us a lift. And we were doing this and not having any luck. And we were all sort of saying the same script, which was to open by saying, hey, you know, we're literally going up to people as they're going to the service station, go to the loo or something, or go to McDonald's. We're going up to people, hi, sorry to disturb you. We're doing this thing for charity. And, you know, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a lift. And as soon as you say, we're doing this thing for charity, people are like, oh, no, fuck up. Like, you're going to ask me for a direct debit, right? This is what people are thinking, charity muggers. And as soon as we said that, people disengaged, and we realised we need to change that script and not open with the charity thing where they think we can ask them for money. Because one bloke said to us, I haven't got any money, And we said, oh no, we're not asking for your money. And he said, I haven't got anything, and just walked off in a rush. And we realised we got to change the script. Don't say anything about charity. We just went up to people and said, "Excuse me, can you give us a lift?" And that's so unusual when you go into a service station. They take a minute and think about it, and then you can say, "We're doing this charity hitchhike. We're trying to get right." But yeah, in that instance, kind of in a way ironic, 'cause they are going to ask you to give money to charity here. But in that instance, we realised that we were kind of making it sound like we were going to ask for some big thing that they didn't want to say yes to. And so we never got to actually ask for our smaller things. So I think that is why they've got, he doesn't want to talk about diet change here. He didn't want to spend long talking about the factory farms. The whole, having the meat eaters as part of the Forget Veganuary campaign is all like signalling that this is not about going vegan so that they can have more chance to get that money.
Back into this one by a bit of a weird path. Do you know how a toilet works, Josh?
Basically.
Yeah, so
I think so, right?
Could you draw a diagram for me of the plumbing and the
got a little
mechanics?
S bend that goes down to stop the smell from coming out, and goes down into the mains, doesn't it? I think so.
I mean, you know better than I do. I think I think most people, if you ask them if they know how a toilet works, they'll say yeah, because they interact with it every day. But if you ask them to get into the real nitty-gritty details...
Well, I certainly couldn't fix a toilet, if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, so, but we like to think that we know how such things work because these are systems we work with every day. And when something's familiar to you, you assume that you understand it. And the food system is like this as well. We go to the shop every day, we buy some food, we take it home, we cook it, and we eat it. So we think we understand food. But this is like the tip of the iceberg of the food system. The far bigger part of it, where the food is produced and it's processed and it's shipped from the other side of the world to where we live, most of us have little to no idea about how this bit works. And when somebody tells you to go vegan, they're placing you in this consumer frame, which is the frame.
True race lever. Say, hello, I'm vegan. You're doing a vegan charity lecture drive. By accepting, you get to stay in the car until you become vegan. Yeah, that'd be a long lift for some people, hey?
And you're used to interacting with the food system. But then when there's something about the food system you don't like factory farming, you figure that the only thing you can do about it, the only leverage point you have is as a consumer. And so what does that mean? That means a boycott. And the problem with boycotting factory farming is maybe you say, okay, I'm willing to make this boycott, but I know that my neighbor's not going to do it and my friend's not going to do it. And so this isn't going to work. Factory farm, I might make a big change, but I'm the sucker and the problem remains. A lot of people reason. And so you basically conclude, well, then there's nothing I can do then. Like the only thing I'm being told I can do is doomed, so I can do nothing, so I despair. Not helpful when you have a problem that so many people want to solve and is so solvable for them to believe that they can't. You need to believe that you can solve it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that is wrong, though, isn't it? The idea that people aren't, like, it's like casting a vote. I mean, no vote is going to sway an election, but if everybody thinks that their vote isn't going to sway the election, therefore they shouldn't vote, then the whole system collapses. Yeah. Like, I've had this conversation with people where, I'm saying, well, I'm going to eat meatless tonight, and they'll say, well, I'm going to have the chicken. I'll be like, but I don't want to kill a chicken. They're like, well, I'm not killing a chicken. The chicken's already back there. It's in the kitchen. It's dead. It's dead, whatever I am going to do. And I'm like, yeah, but if fewer people order the chicken at the restaurant tonight, they're going to order fewer chickens for tomorrow's meals, right? And fewer chicken, and there's going to be less demand overall on the chicken farm, and they're going to produce fewer chickens. Like,
it's funny that it's often kind of like the most... the people that really love markets, I find disproportionately make this argument, and this argument's basically saying that there's no relationship between supply and demand,
right?
Which makes no sense. So yeah, you're right. It is mistaken to say that changing your diet doesn't do anything. It does do something, but I think people feel like it's not going to solve the problem overall, and so they find that disheartening. I think it's strange that people think that way in this context, because when you, donate to help somebody in poverty, you don't say, well, I'm not solving poverty, so there's no point.
No, although that was the genius of World Vision coming up with the sponsor a specific child idea whenever that happened.
Yes.
Like, it used to be that you just donated money and it went somewhere.
Yes.
And then they come up with the idea of sending you a photo of a child, and this is your child, and this is his village. And, we've got a new water well in the village, with clean water for...
This is presumably sheer marketing, and everyone's getting the same picture. Everyone's getting a picture of the same kid, right? I mean, how much would it cost to send someone to take a picture of all of the different kids? probably more than £3 a month or whatever people are asked to give in that case, right? So adopt a polar bear. Like, sorry guys, it's all the same polar bear. Solves a problem in them. Yeah, I mean, I do think he's right to describe it as a boycott. Being vegan is a boycott, and that's not nothing, but it is just very limited. It's just a quiet boycott when you could be out there funding the groups that are properly bringing this down. They know good methods of how to do it, how to put pressure on various different aspects of the food system and on factory farming. And we have the opportunity to go and fund those efforts. Like, it just makes the boycotting part feel so... It's literally doing nothing. It's literally doing nothing, right? It's not adding to the problem, is what it's doing. But it's not actually helping to solve the problem.
For them, and he writes you a little handwritten note. Like, that was brilliant, and of course kind of bullshit, because the money's all going into a big pot, and like a whole bunch of different villages are benefiting from it. But it's a way of getting around that problem that you're talking about, which, if it sounds like I'm moralizing here, I make exactly the same logical, I guess, fallacious leap when it comes to climate change, which I think we've spoken about before, where I just don't buy that it's on me not to fly. Yeah. For example, like,
this is exactly
I
the
kind
point.
of need to fly. I want to fly. I like to fly. The planes go on there anyway. This is sort of similar to like the chickens already out the back, right? The planes go on there. It makes no real difference whether I'm on it or not. I just don't think it should be on my shoulders to be casting a vote against my own interests in order to create slightly less demand for aviation, when it's obvious that the whole problem has to be addressed at a societal, systemic level.
Exactly. I think, there's absolutely...
I don't like the absolution of the individual responsibility. Aidan's not going to argue with that, and there's not his place to argue with that. But I think this is a lot of people's beef with farmkind, to use a term, that they haven't addressed that part. And again, as a vegan, if you're having these conversations, you're well briefed on kind of all of the excuses that people give and the ways that people forget about economics when it comes to understanding supply and demand of animal products. I mean, it is still on us to fly less, right? And that kind of should be part of it and will need to be part of it. There isn't a world where, the government just decided to fix climate change and we can all carry on flying as much as we... No, that is going to include flying getting more expensive so that we all do less of it. And we're going to have to be willing to vote for that or to not vote against it. I think that, people imagine that there are just like a few powerful people who could press the end the bad thing button if only they could be bothered, but they can't. So that's that. But I don't think that's how it is really, right? Like if some airline decided to shut down tomorrow, well, there's still demand for all those flights, so some other airline's going to take them all up. There's probably not going to be, right? It is consumer driven overall. Now, this is not can Aidan avoid getting dragged onto like the vegan dialogue tree? I mean, it's got to be challenging from their perspective.
A sense in which these two issues are connected, and we need to do for animals. We need to make the transition that we did for climate, because climate used to focus on people's individual footprints primarily. The carbon footprint famously being invented by BP, helpfully to them, making us focus on what we're doing and not what
Just explain that in case people don't know that.
The term of a carbon footprint was coined by BP, the oil company. I think it was as part of some of their purportedly, let's talk about how we need to
save the world and everything.
Yes, so that everyone
blaming
think
you,
about
the consumer, and making you think about what your carbon footprint.
I also kind of don't get this point. Am I missing something here? Why would an oil company want consumers to think about that? If I was the oil company exec and I want my oil company profits to be as high as possible, I would take the approach of saying, let's put out the idea that oil company execs are bastards and that there is somebody else whose responsibility it is. And I don't mind, right, I'm not a particularly public person. I don't mind if people say oil execs are bastards. But what I don't want everyone to think is that it is their responsibility to consume less of my lovely oil. Right, I don't quite get this talking point about BP invented the carbon footprint, because that seems like it's not going to be in BP's interests. Like, that is a fair way to think about contributions to climate change. We do all need to try and reduce our own individual impact. That's not to say that there aren't decisions that companies can make one way or another, but at the end of the day, yeah, it is demand driven, right? Why would BP want to invent the carbon footprint? I've never quite got that.
Print is, rather than us as the people who
Exactly.
are refusing to invest adequately
And
in
it's the same
renewables.
thing as telling people to go vegan. It puts the focus on you and the consumer frame and individuals.
Failing to adequately invest in renewables, but that you're going to want to do that if everybody is thinking about carbon footprints now and is keen to reduce their carbon footprint. You're going to want to invest in renewables because now everyone's going to want renewables because they're thinking about their carbon footprint, right? I don't understand why a company would want consumers to think it's on them to consume less of the thing. Unless there was some way more destructive thing that could be done to the company if only those consumers weren't being distracted by their own consumption. Maybe this is where this is going. If we're all thinking about our own consumption and not funding the effort to bring this down on a systemic level, then we're missing the big opportunities. So maybe that's something I would want to demand for oil as our fault. I mean, kind of. To the extent that we're all using oil products and plastics and heating our houses and putting petrol in our cars and everything else, right? Part of the demand for oil is certainly our fault.
And not on systems.
But yes, they get okay. So this is where this is going. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the case of oil. There's presumably some effective environmental lobbying groups that you could give to or something like that would maybe restrict it.
Systems. And we've since done a whole lot less of that.
New vegan Marvel superhero. Yeah, nice idea. That's a cool. Was there ever one? Vegan man or something?
Climate, and a whole lot more focusing on institutional change. And as a result, it's a far bigger movement that's making far more progress because we're not lambasting people for their personal actions. We're lowering the barrier to entry so that anyone can be a part of the solution. This is far, far better, right? Yeah, there's more to be said on that, but I have a third D for you. I'm not finished slagging, telling people to go vegan.
So the two Ds were denial,
and despair, and the third one is defiance. And this is like a very old psychological mechanism. It goes back to Genesis. In the Garden of Eden, God says, "Eat anything you want except for the fruit from that one tree." And suddenly the fruit of that tree looks kind of good, right? Because when somebody tells us not to do something, we want to do it just a little bit more to kind of re-establish our autonomy. This specific mechanism psychologists call reactance. And we know that this is true of food as well. Like it's been, there are studies that show it. They're not very interesting, so I won't bore you with them. But I think a stat that I find really interesting on this is that 97% of Americans agree that whether to be vegetarian or eat meat is a personal choice, and nobody has the right to tell me which one I should do. And what's shocking about this is that 97%, that leaves 3%, right? There are more than 3% of vegetarians. So even the vegetarians agree that whether to be vegetarian or not is a personal choice and you shouldn't tell people what to do. And so is it a surprise that when you tell people who otherwise are sympathetic to solving this problem that, hey, these foods that you love, that you have fond memories of, they're associated with your religion, maybe traditions like Thanksgiving just passed in the US or Christmas, these foods are bad and you are bad for eating them, that we're going to take people that would have otherwise been allies and make them try and defy us.
Who are
But
the people who are answering that survey by saying, yes, I think that I should be bossed around about what I eat? Like
The
who's
3%.
3%. Like I'm always amazed by.
I mean,
Us, me. I mean, Aidan's not going to say this because he's not going to try and talk about diet change, but yes, you would be. There's already animals that we find it unacceptable to eat. You're not allowed to kill dogs for food in my country. You're not allowed to kill cats for food. You're not allowed to kill people for food. So yes, we do tell other people what to eat to some extent already, and it's just going to be where you draw the line, right?
surely they're the people that want to do some of the bossing, and so they're like, okay, you can boss me because I want to boss you that much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kway Chang Kane. Never heard of that one.
So yeah,
like authoritarian regime in which everyone only eats quinoa
yes,
and tofu.
or meat. Who knows what side they're
possible.
on. But yeah, I mean, is it surprising that vegans therefore have become like one of the most hated groups in America? Like there was this 2015 survey which I find hilarious, which was asking people about how much they like or dislike different groups, and people disliked vegans more than they disliked people of different religions and races, more than they disliked immigrants. The only group that they preferred vegans to was drug addicts. So this is the PR outcome of decades of telling people to change their diet. It's not rocket science, and yet we've kind of gotten it wrong again and again and again. So the thing I want animal advocates to take on board is that pressuring and shaming people closes them down. Empathizing with people, giving them agency, giving them more options opens them up. And that's how we can turn this really massive latent support for doing something about this issue into action.
So what are the more options? What are the more options that you give people instead of guilting them?
Well, so there's two senses in which you can give people more options. One is in terms of things they can do about the issue. Instead of changing their diet, they can support the best charities that are working to fix the system. Another is you can give people more options from a food perspective. Like if you're a consumer that wants to not have factory farm products, well, often you're just flat out of luck because everything at your supermarket is factory farmed. Or if it's not, the labels are so opaque that you have no idea what is or isn't humanely farmed. Then there are often just like at restaurants, just like not very good plant-based options. And we're in the process of developing far better alternatives, basically. I'm slagging vegans here. I am vegan. It took me 7 years of struggle to...
There we go. That's what we were wondering. That was as of December 2025. You have a protein dealer? Nice.
To get there. And now I don't find it all that hard. And what I've come to realize is that there's nothing inherent. It needn't be inherently hard. At least not for everyone. It's just about the food system in which we find ourselves. In the same way that you might find it really hard to be, I don't know, halal or kosher in a given place. But if you move to a country where the food system is built,
He didn't want to get drawn on that. He did eventually say I'm vegan. It was a good 38 minutes into the interview. I think that not commenting on this is sort of part of the media strategy at the moment. Half American, half Chinese guy raised in a Shaolin monastery. Kway Chang Kane. Let's have a look then. This fella. I don't know. None of these pictures are of the same person, I feel. Okay, I guess this is the person. All right, pretty based.
it's around that because everybody wants it. It's actually just not hard at all. Yeah. So giving people more options, donating. Can we talk about why that's great?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. I mean, well, before we do, I'm just interested in your
He really doesn't want to let him get to his main picture, does he?
experience as a vegan.
Yeah.
Because I know.
Oh no! You're gonna have to talk about veganism again. You didn't want to do that.
Saying that you don't want to push it on everybody, but there is extricating oneself from the sort of hideous systemic torture of animals that is the factory farming system is one thing. Becoming a vegetarian is another thing. Becoming a vegan feels to many people like human civilization and culture has built up over thousands of years.
Man, he's really going to try to make this a debate about veganism, and Aidan really doesn't want that to happen. He must be thinking, oh, I've got so much good to say against. Aidan's literally like, there's the standard shit tier, carnist excuses, talking points. And we're not here to talk about veganism, and then this guy starts rattling them off like it's so tempting to go after it, isn't it? Oh, he was fully vegan, that guy? Nice. Based, all right. Kwai Chang Kane, all right, fair play.
Is this
and a mystical master at martial arts? Well, that's bonus.
These kind of rich relationships with dairy and eggs, and the use of proteins, animal husbandry, you can't make a cake without. I mean, you can, but you can't make a good cake without.
So many
without
holidays are built
eggs.
around it.
Holidays, but also I mean, just imagine going to a little Italian village and telling a nonna that you can't eat spaghetti because it's got eggs in it.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess, feel like when you say that you're not missing out on anything, it's just like moving to another country that's halal and eating halal. I don't think it's quite true, because you barely notice the halal components of halal. You might sort of notice kosher, but you really notice vegan.
Yeah.
When you're not a vegan and you eat vegan, you either have to engage in isn't it a cool magic trick how they managed to pretend that this isn't vegan?
Yeah.
Because it's trying to replicate something that is
ultra-processed,
not naturally vegan, or you just have to be satisfied with eating a bunch of nuts and berries. How did you get to that over the 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, I didn't say I don't think I'm missing out on anything. I just said that it doesn't have to be hard, and that has become my experience now. That I don't find it hard, in part because it's so much of your. There's a saying, you're the average of your 5 closest friends.
Yeah.
And I like the office I work from in the UK where I'm living is like a vegan by default office, and just when you're not surrounded, like when there's plenty of good options and you're not surrounded by the things that might otherwise tempt you.
Yeah.
I have found it now easy, but I really didn't. Right, like it took me, as I mentioned, 7 years, because when I first started grappling with this issue, which I'd managed to kind of put in a box in my head, like I think most of us do. The only thing I thought I could do was to change my diet. And so I said, Mum, partner, you're not going to see me eating meat anymore. And saying it, that was the easy bit. And then doing it, like, I struggled. And as a result, I often ended up kind of eating meat in secret when nobody else could see me.
Yeah.
And, obviously felt really guilty about this, both because I was doing something I didn't want to do.
That's another thing that I've thought about the donation. This is a big advantage for donations over diet change, I feel. You can't really prove that you're vegan, can you? You might be able to do, it's possible there's some sort of blood test that you could do if you've had lactose or something like that, but, you can't really prove that you're vegan. I can show you my bank statements of me giving to charities, right? You can't really prove it if you're just doing the boycott. Not that that's really relevant in most cases, right? No one ever asks you to prove it, but if they did, I like that I could go and pull my bank statements to prove I'm vegan 2.0. Can't really prove that I'm vegan.
Do for the animals, but also just I felt guilty that I couldn't live in line with my values. Like
True, race lever.
I just felt really shit. And meanwhile, I wasn't actually helping any animals. So it's like a lose-lose. Animals are still not being helped, and I'm feeling shit. So thinking that I had to go vegan was not working for me. And I kind of with the secret meat, I hit my rock bottom moment when I told my partner I was going to see a friend or whatever. She caught me sitting in the front seat of my car, eating half a chicken with my bare hands. And I was like, something's got to give. This is just not working.
It's amazing. It's like you're a meth addict who gets caught with the crack pipe, in the front seat.
It's what it felt like at first.
Chicken drumstick grease dripping off your fingers.
Yeah.
And so what was the biggest thing?
That shit's wild, by the way. I found it quite hard when I first went vegetarian, but I didn't do anything like that.
What was the toughest challenge? I mean, I went pescatarian for almost.
Worth saying, fair play in that scenario to carry on with it and get back on the horse, as it were, right? Another non-vegan metaphor there. a lesser man would have said, I guess I failed at the vegetarian thing. I'm not vegetarian anymore. And I'm going to go back to eating meat. But clearly this guy stuck with it and is now vegan.
Almost a year, and I felt worse because I guess I wasn't doing it right. I mean, I was mainly just eating processed grains as a result. So pasta is easy. Rice and vegetable stir fry is easy. But I end up consuming a huge amount of carbs.
Yeah,
and felt as sluggish and groggy as a person who eats a ton of carbs is wont to.
I mean, I think part of the problem I experienced this as well is that we decide we want to do something about this. We think we can only change our diet, and then we go cold turkey for one, and we have no idea what we're doing, and so we eat a bunch of pasta. There are actually more foods than pasta that are vegan. Did you know? Like so many traditional foods from around the world are like protein rich and plant based, but we just don't know about them, and we don't know how to cook them, and so there's a bit of a learning journey. And like
what? I mean, quinoa, I guess. Chickpeas.
Yeah, there's the whole cornucopia of legumes out there.
Right.
Like in South Asian cuisine, in East Asian cuisine, there's just like so much you can do. Millions of types of beans and lentils and chickpeas and so on, and tofu. You can this food can really slap if you're doing it right. And
right.
It's just that most Australian culture, not known for its traditional plant-based food.
No.
Indian culture is,
Yes.
Most of the
They do seem to produce a disproportionate amount of vegan activists, though, Australia. Do you think? I feel like they punch above their weight in terms of animal activists per capita, I guess.
world has only recently started really adopting eating meat at scale. So they know how to do it.
That's true, but that's mainly because most of the world was dirt poor and they were eating rice.
Oh, well, many of them were eating rice. Many of them were
maize,
eating things.
Or, some other wheat-based product.
We didn't go on a journey from only eating staple grains to we're eating the diet we have now. We went through a lot of the healthy, diverse plant-based cuisines. They just don't get a lot of airtime. But yeah, what was the hardest part? I think for me, firstly, trying to go cold turkey was a bad idea. Recidivism rates, if you want to call it that, are higher. This has been shown. And I think also...
Is that true? I feel like I've heard the opposite. Or I'm thinking of that Tobias Linnert debate with, what's the guy from... Who was it that we watched, Tobias Linnert debate? I can't remember that guy's name. But he had that study about people giving up smoking and how the cold turkey people were more likely to stick with it than a sort of reduce gradually kind of approach. American vegans are objectively the greatest vegans on earth. We'll see who's giving more to animal charities. That's what it's going to come down to.
So we shouldn't be thinking like purists. Like you can get far more than 80% of the benefit to animals by cutting out the 20% worst products.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think the hardest thing for me was as this 20-something rugby playing, weightlifting guy, thought of myself as a bit of a carnivore, steak's my favorite food. There's this identity and masculinity idea that is in the ether that what is it based on? But nonetheless I grappled with it, and I think that's the thing that I found hard to kind of overcome.
That's interesting. I mean, that reminds me a little bit of quitting drinking as well, where there's all this. It's not just like you're just stopping doing this thing that is not serving you anymore.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden this rejection of a fundamental cultural precept about what it means to have fun and to be a devil-may-care person and
from
to
your country,
be the life of the party, to be an Australian, let alone of Irish, New Zealand descent, who are all heavy drinkers. And similarly, I can imagine that if you give up red meat, what are you, a pussy? What mistake?
Yeah. Yeah, especially I was still playing rugby at the time, It didn't go over well with the team.
Right, right.
But yes, I struggled for years and eventually I got there, but I only discovered afterwards, and I kick myself about it now, that this whole time there were far easier things I could have been doing that are just as impactful, namely donating to the right charities. And this is part of what inspired me to start the nonprofit that Farm Kind that I run, where we identify these charities and recommend them to the public, because I know that there are hundreds of millions of people out there that don't feel comfortable with this issue. They want to do something about it. They don't realize that there's other things that they can do.
Yeah.
And I just want to make it easy for people.
So let's talk about those donations. Where do they go and what do they do?
Yeah, because you mentioned World Vision before. I had an experience with World Vision that left me very jaded about charity entirely. I think I was 12, and they have the 40-hour famine campaign.
I used to do that as a kid.
Yeah.
Yep.
I signed up with a bunch of my schoolmates. It went poorly from the start because when I called up World Vision to give your team name, I went to a school called Grammar. I said, we'll be Grammar Boys. And they misheard me and they put on all of our material Dragon Love, which is not a name you want for your team when you're a 12-year-old boy.
At least call you Grandma Boys or something that sounds like Grammar Boys.
Yeah.
Dragon Love.
Yeah,
I mean, Dragon Love's actually a pretty cool name. How old were you?
When you were a 12-year-old boy,
yeah,
I think I was just old enough that I didn't want to be called Dragon Love.
Right, dragons are lame now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
called Batman Boys or something.
Yes. Oh,
that was so cool 18 months ago.
Batman Boys, that was the cool kids when I was in primary school.
Right.
Didn't let me be one of the Batman Boys. I have a lot of trauma about the Batman Boys. It is
Sorry
true.
to bring it up. I can see the PTSD flapping across your face.
Anyway, you should see the Batman Boys now. They're nothing.
No, they're nothing. Now you're right here on Uncomfortable Conversations. You made it.
Where was I talking about? Oh, World Vision and being disillusioned with charity. Yeah. So I didn't realize.
And for people who don't know, I think the 40-hour famine's everywhere, right? But it's
It's guys are so determined to not let him finish. I've thrown him off course so many times, I swear.
It's a thing where it seems to be mostly young people, right? It seems to be like teenagers will go around, and it's like a readathon or one of these other things where you might go to your neighbors and your friends and say, will you sponsor me to do this thing? They pledge a certain amount if you succeed. And then once you've got your money raised, you go on for 40 hours, you can't eat anything.
Yeah.
And it's
or
a
drink
way
anything.
of expressing, no, I think you can drink water.
Oh. I mean, maybe I got that bit wrong.
Yeah, you're allowed to
Just doing it the hard way.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, so for 40 hours, you don't eat.
Yeah, isn't that what? Aren't you maybe going to die if you don't drink any water for a couple of days? No wonder he's disillusioned with it.
And that is supposed to show solidarity with
people
people who
sponsor
live
you
in
to do it.
grinding poverty.
Yes.
And then that money goes to World Vision.
Exactly. But I didn't know at the time, firstly, our family later did sponsor a child, and the extent to which the kind of aid was tied to religious conversion. I remember the kid that our family was sponsoring always hated their religious studies classes and complained that they had to do it. I didn't like that bit when I learned about it. But much worse is just the extent to which where is the evidence that this charity is doing really good work to use your money wisely and help people? Couldn't find it.
Well, I got a little letter from Mbutu in Uganda. It's handwritten. It's got to be legit.
True, but how much is Mbutu benefiting for that dollar compared to what else I might be doing with it? And so I became quite disillusioned with charity for many years until I discovered that actually there are evidence-based charities out there that can do really insane amounts of good with your dollar. And so I guess the combination of that insight and telling people to go vegan is not working. People want to do something. Let's make it easy for people to do as much or even more good than going vegan. That's where FarmKind came from. And yeah, the recommended charities, we have 6 of them at the moment, and they kind of...
Am I religious? No. Well, Vegan 2.0, it's a proto religion.
Tackle this problem from a wide range of angles, and they...
I was raised vaguely Christian, but, I don't think my parents' heart was ever in it.
help all of the main types of animals that are affected
How about you, Race Lever?
by factory farming. And where do I start? I think a really cool example of the real progress that charities like the ones we recommend have achieved over the past decade is corporate campaigns. And the way these work is, if you're a consumer, when you're at the shop, you might try and find the free-range eggs because you care and you want the products to be raised humanely. But when you're buying a burger at McDonald's, you're kind of not really thinking about where that comes from. And so it allows big corporations to go as cheap as possible in their supply chain. And they're serving consumers a product that really, if they knew about the cruelty involved in the supply chain, they wouldn't be happy to buy it. This is what economists call an information failure. And what corporate campaigns do is they address this information failure by going to, let's say, McDonald's, this is a real example, and saying, hey, McDonald's, we're going to tell people about the battery cages that you use in your supply chain. And this is going to hurt your brand because they won't like it unless you commit to phasing it out. And sometimes the threat alone is enough and companies come to heel and make these commitments and follow through. But sometimes they say, yeah, try me. And so then the charities will do like digital campaigns spreading the word about what's going on. They'll
Nice. That sounds based.
protest at McDonald's HQ, generate media attention. And almost always the companies come around and realize, hey, the cost to my brand of people understanding what's actually going on in the supply chain is higher than the cost of just giving people what they want. And so McDonald's committed to phasing out cage eggs by 2025. They achieved it in 2023.
Is that globally?
Good question. I'm not sure if it's globally. It's at least in the US, but
Okay,
globally,
well, that's all what really matters. I mean, the US is probably 60% of McDonald's sales, I would guess.
yeah,
Who knows?
I don't know. But globally, thousands of such commitments have been achieved and followed through on. And so at a micro level, like donating to the Humane League, which is one of our recommended charities that does this work, you can spare a chicken from a life of being confined in a cage for 85 cents, which is remarkably cheap, right? But it also adds up at the macro level, because 10 years ago, when they started really working on this, cage-free in the US was something like 5% of eggs. Now we're at 45% of eggs and poised to overtake 50% next year. So these little things, these little things that each individual animal like that is a miracle that you've helped it for 85 cents, but it adds up to actual systemic change. And then when the percentage gets high enough, then actually it becomes in enough farmers' interests to lobby for it to be outlawed, to get the kind of slow movers to come into line.
Yes, so true. So true. That's the second part of this mechanism, and why it's good when non-vegan companies bring out vegan products, because now they stop lobbying against vegan products as non-vegan companies. And in many cases, they may end up lobbying for, like Lidl is now lobbying for minimum plant-based reporting targets in the UK, because it's something they already do, so it's a competitive advantage for them if that becomes law.
And so in the UK at the moment, where they're at 80% cage-free eggs, there's a real prospect that caged eggs might be banned legally in the coming years. So these...
Yep, and again, since this interview, they have announced that is indeed going to happen.
Corporate campaigns can contribute to regulatory change ultimately.
And do the companies that you donate to, are they directly involved in lobbying for political change and lobbying parliamentarians as well, or do they always do it through the corporate route?
In some cases they are. So the Humane League, who I mentioned, I also mentioned before, Prop 12, which is a piece of law in California that set minimum standards for animal welfare and banned the import of the sale of products in that state from elsewhere that don't meet those standards.
Is that right? So if you're in California, you aren't buying caged pig meat.
Yes, you now aren't. And this is actually really important, because another issue is if you ban something in one country,
you
it just gets
outsource
exported
it to somewhere else.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which are...
There's also huge, because California, I'm pretty sure it's like 20% of the US population in that one state. I think that's right.
A charity that my partner works for is trying to close this loophole, because I think a lot of consumers don't realize when you go and you buy eggs, you assume in Australia the eggs you buy must meet Australian standards. They don't. That only applies to Australian producers. And so it's
Do we have non-Australian eggs in Australia?
I don't know. I assume so. We do import a lot of animal products despite being a major exporter, and this is true of many countries. So it's a loophole that basically nobody realizes exists, and it's a rare case where it's like a win-win for local farmers and for consumers and for animals. Win-win.
Yeah.
True. This is from Bryant Research. British farmers, consumers and animal advocates have made their position crystal clear. If the UK bans cruelty at home, we shouldn't import it from abroad. In our recent survey of current and former UK farmers, 92% of livestock farmers and 85% of arable farmers said they support government policies to restrict the import of low welfare animal products into the UK. And that's even higher than the general population. So this is one thing where we've got livestock farmers in stronger agreement than even the average person, which is still very, very strong, by the way. 5/6 of people saying, yes, we should ban low welfare imports. And then for livestock farmers, is even higher. So that is really like a political opportunity. It's like the rare issue where the vegans and the livestock farmers are going to agree.
Yeah. I
So-
mean, the glaring example for me is prawns in Australia, where you can get some of the best prawns in the world out of Australian waters, but it's not necessarily always.
Hey, thanks for joining. Am I optimistic about veganism growing? So I was just showing earlier this graph that I posted on LinkedIn. It's like the slow growth of vegan and meat-free diets in the UK. It is going upwards, but very slightly. These are, statistically significantly higher than it was when they started in 2019 for meat-free diets as well, but it's very, very slow. I do think that we need some other strategies other than telling people to go vegan, because otherwise it's waiting for this line to get to, the year 3000 before this reaches 100%, right? So I do think we need some other strategies, and that's what FarmKind's doing, trying to get more resources into the animal movement. Totally makes sense as like our next objective, because we've got a long way to go. We've got a long fight ahead. And the other side's much more well-resourced than we are. So I think we badly need to use these strategies other than, waiting for this line to go up to 100%. We got to be more proactive in getting people to go vegan 2.0. Getting people to give to effective animal charities, getting people to do organised activism, where there's some degree of professionals having decided on appropriate corporate or government targets, right, like the Fast Action Network. Those are the main things. And then also, persuading others to join. And as somebody said in chat, be vegan 3.0, trying to get people to go vegan 2.0. But yeah, I think that donating is the most impactful thing that you can do from what I've seen. And there's essentially, theoretically, no upper limit, as they say. I think New Harvest the best. Hey, Oggy. New Harvest is one of the charities that I give to, actually. They were at some point, Animal Charity Evaluators recommended. And the Good Food Institute is another one that has had a lot of cachet in the effective altruism community. Developing alternatives to animal products, I think, is a big part of the solution.
It's clear if you go to a fish market, let alone the supermarket, where the prawns are from. And there can be 2 trays of prawns on ice, and one can be just $2 more, which is not much a kilo for prawns, and it can be out of the fresh waters of the South Pacific in Australia, and there can be one right next to it that looks almost identical, which can be from a cesspool in Vietnam, which is just a complete a pond of feces with the prawns just thriving around, thrashing around each other, and
not thriving.
Not from thriving, thrashing. Jono, now I'm curious about the McDonald's.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're real-based race lever, you can do both, right? There's someone in my audience who would want me to point that out. For in-depth, you can do both. So that's also true. I mean, I don't want people to feel moral licensing the other way. Like, just because you're vegan, don't think that you don't have to help fund the active solutions here. Right? People are worried about people doing the donating and then feeling like they don't need to get vegan. I'd be worried about the other way around as well, right? I don't want people to stop at being vegan. Like, what? And it would be weird too as well, because let's be honest, that is much more effort than donating 15 quid a month, as FarmKind is suggesting. Right? It's nothing really, right? Most people are paying several times that for their phone contract. It's like not a substantial amount of money. So yeah, I don't want that to be underrated. And you could give 10 times that, right? I give more than 10 times that. Yeah, I hear you, Race Lever. I think that most people who are welfareists are not trying to stop at welfare improvements. Yeah, it's incremental, right? It's going in the same direction. You can indeed have a positive impact by purely donating, but it's not philosophically consistent. Yeah, I mean, you might feel like a bit of a hypocrite if you signed up to do the donating and then you were still eating meat from factory farms. That's another thing that I think it's not a given that people who sign up to do the donating won't subsequently feel more pressure to go vegan themselves. Missy, I don't donate, do activism, but always have financial. I'd say, yeah, I mean, this is the thing as well. Some, people in different financial positions, and I totally get that it might not be feasible for some people to be donating. I think that you can do a lot with a very modest amount of money. And I came across effective altruism and had the idea that I was going to donate 10% of my income before I was earning an income, like as a student. And so I think that was helpful because I never missed the money, if you see what I mean. But yeah, I mean, doing what you can in terms of donations, I think is good. And then other than that, I mean, I am always recommending this, action.thehumaneleague.org, as a free thing that you can do that's going to be very easy and help a lot of animals. Where I can just click through to these. I get a comment that I can copy paste. Sends me to the Facebook page where I can post the comment. And because somebody has done the hard work of organising these campaigns and coordinating them and checking on all the targets and who are the people to email and so on, I know that there's a bunch of other people doing this at the same time. And, we've been doing this long enough now to have seen at least one victory from Subway, who agreed to phase out cages after we were posting on their social medias and emailing executives and stuff like that for many weeks. So we've been at it long enough that we've seen one of these campaigns result in a win. And this is this is bringing up my email program. I'm clicking send and then that's it, done. Super easy to do. And still, it seems like there's not that many people doing it when you look at the social posts. You sometimes see maybe half a dozen other people commenting on these. But I suspect that the impact of one additional person doing this is like not negligible. So this is a good free alternative. And again, it's like doing something proactively, because the veganism it's a boycott and it's limited at that, right? It's like, I'm not going to contribute to the problem, but it's good to have ways to contribute to the solution as well.
Jono, can you look up the what proportion of McDonald's sales are in the US versus other countries? I just think that's interesting.
And are they cage free globally?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I would guess that they are, but Jono can tell us.
Yeah.
You asked so these charities
It feels like years ago that they were talking about it. Did I go back to that? Surely that can't have been where I paused it.
work on legislative change. So
Yeah.
that Prop 12 that I mentioned, the animal ag lobby, which is very, very powerful. In fact, more is spent on big ag lobbying in the US than defense or oil. So it's a powerful lobby. Have tried to take this to court to have it overturned.
Can that be true? Oh, lobbying, he's saying. Defence or oil lobbying. Not than spent on defence. Surely.
And the Humane League, one of our charities that we recommend, worked to defend it at the Supreme Court and won. But now the new US government is introducing, is it called the EATS Act? They're trying to overturn it again. And the non-profit sector is working to combat them again. So yes.
It is incredibly corrupt, the agricultural subsidy system, if people aren't aware. Like, this was introduced back when, the majority of Americans worked on farms. And
Yes.
so it was a way of supporting, an essential service that a lot of people did. And now it's just a boondoggle for the tiny number of massive companies
Yes.
that get huge subsidies and tax windfalls.
What is a boondoggle? Is that an Australian thing? A boondoggle is a wasteful project, especially a government-funded one, seen as a waste of time and money. North American. That sounds like such an Australian phrase, doesn't it? Or one of these things. Little friendship bracelet type things. Well, there you go. Learned something today. Did anyone know that term? I've never heard that before.
What's the answer, Jono? 41% of global McDonald's sales are in the US. Okay.
Not bad guess. He said 60. Not bad. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it's that high.
And the
Okay.
and the okay, and Australia, New Zealand, and the US are the cage-free McDonald's jurisdictions. That's interesting. All right.
But other like giants, like
Not the UK and Europe then.
I don't know, Walmart, for example, like there are thousands of massive corporations that have come to heel, and this is what adds up to going from 5% to 45%.
Yeah, right.
So that's one of the ways that our charities help. I think there's some maybe even cooler new solutions to factory farming that are still emerging. There are two categories of technological solutions. One of these is alternatives, and the other is like improvements.
Yeah.
So in improvements, this is tech that can make it cheaper to farm animals more efficiently and in a way that respects their welfare. And one is this cool technology called in ovo sexing, and it addresses a problem. You wanted to hear more about problems that I think most people don't know about, which is what happens to all of the to lay eggs, we need egg-laying hens, and they've got to be born somewhere. And when those hens are born, what happens to the male chicks that are born and obviously can't lay eggs? These are considered waste by the factory farming industry, and so they're killed on their first day of life. In some cases, I almost couldn't believe this when I first heard it, literally by just like putting them in a bin and letting them crush and suffocate one another to death, or more commonly through maceration, which is a nice way of saying putting them through a giant blender. So this is what happens to the male chicks that would, the females of which go on to lay eggs.
It's a pretty grim system where the macerator is probably the preferable option in that case. Right. Neither option's great. But he's going to go on to talk about in ovo sexing. I have a video about that. Called This Technology Could End Chick Culling. It's pretty cool. It's already quite widespread. I think it's like 25% of eggs in Europe. And it's just coming to America. And a lot of the corporates have bought in. Like, this is one of those things that's like unbelievably good news to the point where it's hard to actually process it or appreciate the scale of it. Like, we're not going to be macerating billions of day-old chicks anymore. Pretty badass. It's quite difficult to scale one's emotional reaction appropriately. There's huge moral progress through technology.
And when you
Speaking about the animal testing news, no, I haven't seen that, yeah.
That's right. I mean, surely you wouldn't throw them out, would you? Because you could at least sell them for pet food or something.
Yeah, I think they're often used for pet food in this case. Does this justify a short and cruel life? I think many people would say not. Would it be better that these chickens didn't exist?
Dogs eat their own shit, so really they don't need a macerated baby.
Exactly. Yeah, we can do better for our dogs than that. So what in ovo sexing is it's a technology that basically can scan eggs before they are hatched to determine their sex, and if they're male, they are destroyed before they are born instead of doing the cruel thing of letting them.
Labour ban on peaceful protest at animal testing centres slated as draconian assault on democracy. That sounds pretty dystopian.
Well, about 2 months ago, stuff resigned. There's the police up they go.
Pressures building on Egypt's president after.
All right, there's something else now. Campaigners accusing the government of draconian crackdown of taking away fundamental right to protest peacefully after it made non-violent demonstrations at animal testing facilities a criminal offence. Advocates for free speech and animal rights warn the move by Home Secretary Szeps Mahmoud set a dangerous precedent towards clamping down on basic freedoms. Yeah, that's not great. Activists staging round-the-clock vigils at a Cambridgeshire site breeding beagles for laboratory tests vowed to risk arrest, continue protesting. Well, based for them, this is not good news. Anyone breaching the new ban may now face prison or unlimited fine. Why have they done this? Tens of thousands of people wrote to their MPs and members of the House of Lords to express their anger at the proposal before the vote. The government managed to pass the amendment by 301 votes to 110, after the Tories appeared to abstain on the issue, having previously tried to introduce the same measure before the election. What's the stated reason? Government has argued that interference with the life sciences sector risks weakening the UK's ability to act swiftly in a medical crisis such as another pandemic. I mean, that seems pretty weak. Nathan McGovern of the Animal Rising Activism Organisation said smuggling the legislation through with without scrutiny or debate was un-British. Yeah. This is not good. Public opposition to animal testing is substantial, and peaceful protests has a long and legitimate history in driving ethical and scientific progress. Yeah, absolutely. What's the stated reason for this? That we need to do it in case there's another COVID. Brilliant. We'll be interested to see how this goes. Eh? Change about providing police with powers to respond proportionally to disruptive protest activity that undermines our nation's health. I mean, that seems pretty weak. Moral improvement will only happen if capitalism allowed for it. The number one priority should be to make moral acts cheaper and more attractive. Yeah, I agree with that. People are always going to act in their own interests, ultimately. So yeah, you want to make doing the right thing as easy as possible.
Be born and then destroying them. So this is
Interesting.
And it's like unbelievably cheap. And so this is being rolled out in the EU already, in Brazil, I think soon in the US. And I know someone that's trying to work to bring this to Australia. If you work for an Australian grocer and you want to have Innovosexed eggs, get in touch. I know someone that's trying to make it happen.
And presumably a lot simpler as well, logistically, to just get rid of a bunch of eggs than to have to deal with squawking, chirping little male birds.
And the operating cost of these things is like approximately zero. So it's very, very cheap to do.
Right.
That's it. I mean, I'm just thinking about the Animal Charity Evaluators graph, which shows the number of animals in each of these situations and how labs is also less than 1%. So I try and keep it in proportion. If there's, fewer than 1% of the animals in this scenario, and 99% plus on the farms, then especially if one of those is much, much harder to do something about. Well, it's both pretty hard to do something about, I guess.
There are technological solutions like this.
Now, just to clarify, not to sound like an anti-abortion.
Yeah, especially interesting as some animal rising activists were just found not guilty for taking beagles. Yeah, true. Wasn't there another case where they did get found guilty, and a seemingly identical case with a different jury, I suppose, found this lot not guilty? That's an interesting one, hey? How's that happen?
Lunatic. But is there that much moral difference necessarily between killing a live chick and killing a chick that's still in the egg? Like if it's a fertilized egg and the chick is growing in the egg, it depends at what stage of development you're discarding the egg.
Yes.
I mean, it may still feel pain if it's about to hatch.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when in the developmental process they do it, but given the goals of the people creating this technology, it would be as early as
enough.
possible.
Right.
Yeah, it is before they can feel pain. That's a fair question. It is before they can feel pain, from what we can tell. I went over this in my video.
How big is the difference? I don't know. Is there a difference? Would you rather destroy the eggs very, very early on or have it be born and then chuck it in the blender? I think most people would say yes in the same way they would say yes about that if it was said about a baby.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not to make this... Let's not solve abortion today.
No,
Leave that for another conversation.
Yes. Clearly there's a difference between like a 5-day-old blastocyst and an 8-month-old embryo that's about to be born. Okay, that's cool.
Cool, right? So,
yeah.
So there's tech solutions when it comes to just making farming more humane, but then there's also alternatives. And people, you've seen your like plant-based burger, perhaps not that exciting. Some of them are getting pretty good. But then there's kind of cultivated meats and like precision fermentation is the thing I find crazy, which is, I'm not an expert on how this works, but they're basically able to take a certain kind of yeast, I think it is, and feed it biomass, and it produces milk, like actual, literal, on a cellular level milk, and no animals are involved.
Wow.
So I think like there are technologies like this that are being developed, and support for these technologies comes from one of our charities, the Good Food Institute, that works on removing regulatory bottlenecks, making sure that when these technologies get a fair cut of like subsidies for like food and R&D tech, and helping bring about these replacements sooner, because I think the future looks like more humanely raised animal products. It looks like eating more plants because our doctors tell us we need to for our health and for the like sustainability of the planet. And it also looks like some amount, yet to be seen how big of an amount, of these kind of alternatives. So yeah,
and you're talking about alternatives that again are not like,
Don't say ultra processed.
like a plant burger. They're alternatives, meaning they are actual meat or milk in terms of their biology, but they didn't come out of a sentient creature. They were grown.
Yeah, there's two types of alternative here. There's like functional alternatives, which is like your plant-based milk, which many people are very happy with and is increasing its market share globally. And then there are the like literal cellular identical substitutes.
Do you know where that is in terms of like lab-grown meat? I feel like for 10 years we've been
it's been just around the corner.
Just around the corner. It's like a self-driving car.
It exists. Beef burger.
Yeah, one of the most successful cultivated meat companies is an Australian company actually called Vow. I don't know if it's yet for sale in Australia or they're just selling it in Asia. Asia's ahead of the game on cultivated meat. That's where the earliest approval was in Singapore, and I think there's a couple of other countries that have approved as well. But yeah, Vow is... I was at a conference recently where Val spoke, and they said over 100,000 people have had their product, which I was shocked. I had no idea that it was on that scale. I thought it was kind of still like cheap early prototypes, maybe 100 people have eaten it or something, but no, they're properly, they're selling it. Cultivated meat, real meat, not from animals. They're selling it. It's happening. It's already happening. It's not happening here yet, but it's happening.
Because, for example, chicken nuggets, I think the next challenge is bringing it, it's easy to make something that's kind of like mince, like a burger, bringing it the same sort of structure of like a chicken breast, as I understand it, is far harder. And there are various technological hurdles to be overcome. And I think part of like, a lot of people are a bit down on alt proteins at the moment. I know you were chatting with Sam Harris about this.
Don't say ultra processed.
And he was complaining, where are my lab-grown burgers? And I think there was just a massive hype wave, as that is for a lot of new technology, especially around COVID time. This is when like plant-based sales peaked.
Right.
And so when you look at where we expected things to be, and when you look at the recent trajectory of like sales of these products, it doesn't look that good.
Right.
When you zoom out a bit and you look at like what exists now.
Hey, Jake, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate that. Nah, race lever, come on. Cultivated meat's based. Come on. We spoke about this. I did a little article for the Vegan Society arguing opposite another vegan who was anti-cultivated meat. I'm definitely pro-cultivated meat. I think it's going to be one of the things that is going to be necessary to do away with the factory farms ultimately.
Versus what existed 10 years ago, it is wizardry, what we can create now. So if you like project that forward another 10 years and see where we might be.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of things like sausages and chicken nuggets and burger patties, there's surely there's no impediment there. I understand that it's probably going to be a long time before you can construct a steak, because that's a different kettle of fish or kettle of meat. The charity that you were talking about that works to improve the regulatory environment for that kind of research, do they directly fund R&D as well, or is it mostly about making sure that stupid laws like Florida's, I think Florida's banned all this, right? And Florida's banned even research into
so there's like
certainly the sale of lab-grown meat.
Yeah, some of the efforts are about like leveling the regulatory playing field, like, they're just getting rid of flat out bans on these products or...
Yeah, that's so cooked. Apparently, it's like a lower bar than one might think. First, because it's not being sold anywhere in the States yet. Well, actually, that might not be true. I think it is being sold someplace in the States. I think in California. But yeah, it's... one analysis I've heard is that the states that have banned cultivated meat will most likely end up quietly overturning those bans. They're being contested. They're not. It's being contested, and they're not constitutional, I believe. But yeah, work to be done. There's work to be done, clearly. So that's Good Food Institute they're talking about. Go and give to the Good Food Institute.
Unfair labeling rules, like the one that's just been passed being passed in the EU, to make you unable to call something milk in case somebody thinks that their almond milk came from a cow. Then there is also, I think in some cases, directly funding, but the better place.
No, I haven't seen that recently, but maybe I'll check it out. True, Augie.
Of getting leverage is accessing government funding that would go to maybe something kind of stupid, and have it go to this technology instead, or at least give it a proportional amount of subsidies and R&D support to factory farming, which it gets the vast majority of it at the moment. Because the amount of ridiculous ways in which it is not a level playing field for factory farming just bothers me so much. I mean, there's the subsidies, there's the unfair labeling, as I mentioned, there's the bans, but even like in the US, for example, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, industries have to abide by these. Factory farming gets a carve out. Why? You tell me.
A carve out from the Clean Water Act.
Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Ridiculous. Really? Or like they get kind of state...
That's mental. I hadn't heard that one.
Subsidized insurance because, with bird flu that's been going around in the US at the moment, when you lose your flock, when your flock becomes infected, you have to kill them, and you don't bear the cost of this as a farmer. You get government-provided insurance. And this basically means that you can then take the massive risk and farm your animals in a way that makes it far more likely for there to be an outbreak of disease and not bear a fair amount of the costs.
Moral hazard. Who's going to say moral hazard?
Okay, which reminds me, I mean, we've been talking about this issue in terms of animal welfare, and there are some people, they're rare, who say don't like animals, don't care, but it doesn't really matter, I don't think, for this issue, because it's also a catastrophe for the environment and for public health. If you care to
Yeah.
Want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll try and keep it to the things people might not know about, and public health is one of them, because factory farming is a major pandemic risk. We confine, basically, these really cramped and unsanitary conditions is the perfect breeding ground for diseases that can then jump from animal to human and become the next pandemic. And if you think about it, we're talking about like hundreds of thousands of genetically near identical animals, immunocompromised because of the stress they're under, cramped together in these giant farms. Obviously, disease will be rampant.
I see you, Race Lever. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy your food.
And we can manage it with antibiotics, and we do. In fact, 3/4 of global antibiotics are not fed to people, but to animals, which most people don't know about.
And that's prophylactically. That's not even them being fed to animals who are sick.
It's just in the feed.
They just put a low dose into the feed to supposedly prevent them from getting infections.
Yes.
Which, of course, everyone,
Sometimes I think this kind of shit already sounds like some mental medieval shit that we are already like, oh, okay, obviously it was mad that people did that in the 1500s, but they're describing things that are happening today. How have we not grown out of this, honestly?
Every time you've ever gotten a dose of antibiotics, the doctor says, make sure you finish the dose of antibiotics because you don't want to give yourself a low dose because then that helps to breed antibiotic resistance bacteria.
Yes.
And we're doing that on a massive, massive scale constantly every single day, just rolling the dice to generate new strains of bacteria in animals by giving them small amounts of bacteria to acclimatize themselves against.
Yeah, and we lose the dice roll all the time. Like, I think it's 1.27 million people die a year already due to antibiotic-resistant diseases that overusing antibiotics drives. And some people predict this could be the number one killer, in fact, in 2050, because at a certain point we run out of antibiotics that work, and then we're screwed.
It is incredible when you think about, like, it was only a century and a bit ago that antibiotics were discovered.
Yes, a miracle.
And so before that, you got a cut and you could die from a cut. You could lose your leg from a scratch. And then all of a sudden, we've just enjoyed this incredible period where you don't have to worry about bacterial infections.
Yes.
And now we could be entering another period where we go back to the pre-penicillin days and everything has to be antiseptic because you never know if you're going to get
and
sepsis.
This is what I mean when I say that factory farmers trade off externalities for a little bit of profit, because the fact that we have antibiotics that work, this is a public good that needs to be preserved. But when you feed 75% of our antibiotics to animals to save yourself a buck or two, they're squandering something that we all have the right to enjoy. But back to like the point about pandemics, you can manage disease with antibiotics, but that's only bacteria. You can't kill viruses, right? And that's why we have bird flu running rampant across the US right now. And if you look back since the 1940s, half of zoonotic diseases, which is diseases that come from animals to humans, have been traced back to animal agriculture. Think of the H1N1 bird flu, swine flu, mad cow disease, SARS. These all come from animals. COVID, depending, this is controversial, but the original hypothesis of it coming from a crowded wet market in Wuhan, this is intensive animal agriculture.
But a lot of people will be thinking, sure, but it's not really our way of treating animals that's doing that, isn't it? Isn't it more unsanitary and even more cramped
in the wet market case?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and MERS came from camels in Arabia. Like, you don't hear of a lot of examples, do you, of pandemics originating from a
Yeah, hell yeah, you do.
concentrated animal feeding operation?
Yeah, you do. Yes, you do. Yeah, all the bird flu, the swine flu. There's been several swine flu and bird flu. Like, bird flu's the main one, right? Yes, they do often come from concentrated intensive animal agriculture.
In Wyoming.
Well, I mean, mad cow disease, was that not the UK
yes,
where that emerged?
That was.
I can't tell you where these other diseases emerged, but factory
that wasn't
farming...
viral, but that was because of an insane practice of feeding sheep
cows.
Feeding cow brains to cows.
Yes.
Yeah.
But factory farming, this worst way that we treat animals, that is creates the most of a vector for the spread of pandemics. This is a US invention. So I don't think we can put this on other cultures. I mean, where the US is certainly exporting it, and the growth in China is very disheartening. But I don't think we can say that factory farming is an other cultures thing.
Right. Also, just on antibiotics, before we leave that, in case people are going to get freaked out about the fact that they're all going to die of bacterial infections, there is apparently a range of antibiotics that we could be discovering and inventing, but we're not, because drug companies don't have an incentive to do so, because it's not a very profitable thing to invent, because people only take it once in a while. But drug companies, if you're going to spend billions and billions of dollars on something, you want to be curing a disease that people have to take your pill every single day for 20 years or something. So, it's much more useful to invent cures for cancer and things that are widespread and long-lasting, rather than I'm just going to take one course of antibiotics for 4 days and then be done with it. But hopefully we will invest properly in R&D. It is not inconceivable that there's a whole other spectrum of antibiotics that we haven't.
That's interesting. It feels like if you were the company that invented the antibiotic resistance proof antibiotic, that'd be quite lucrative when the antibiotic resistance really kicks into everything else. Now, I'm not saying on an individual level, people only take these for, a course of 5 days or whatever it may be. But, on the societal level, you have millions of people and some percentage of them taking antibiotics 5 days at a time. I don't know, there's I've never heard this before, that we could be discovering new antibiotics was not profitable enough. Seems like it could be very profitable if you're, the guy with the only antibiotics that work anymore.
Oh, there are.
That are
We
just
discover
not on
new
the
ones.
market.
Yeah, I mean, so I hang out with a lot of charity nerds. I know some people working on exactly this problem. They're called ARMA, and they're trying to solve this incentive issue through pull incentives, where basically you get governments to pre-commit funding. We will buy antibiotics from you for this price, so that, not that they will buy them from you. We will remunerate you for every antibiotic sold at this price, so that they do have an incentive to generate them. Because
I guess this is a real problem.
yeah, and this is a way we can solve this problem.
Yeah. You mentioned about in terms of public health as well as
But also it sounds like his solution was pretty much the solution I just mentioned as well.
Environment.
And the environment. So as well as like the viral question, there's also just the health of what we're eating question, which is like after having kids, I started becoming aware of how shitty the options are in terms of just buying food in most places. Like in most shopping center food courts, it's pretty hard to find food that isn't industrialized shit. You stop at a service station, a gas station, and like it's hard to find a banana. It's really easy to find a huge amount of processed stuff. Now, obviously, this is just supply and demand.
Didn't say ultra processed. I'll hold it.
I assume that they wouldn't sell a lot of bananas and they'd go rotten before they did, whereas they can keep the chocolate bars there forever. But is there a way of addressing the range of different foods that we can consume?
I mean, yeah, I had thought that it was not just supply and demand either, but I had a conversation with a famous American chef and now writer, Mark Bittman, who has written books on this issue, and he argues that in the same way that it was, in many ways, policy decisions around subsidies that drove the industrialization of animal agriculture, it did the same in incentivizing the production of like really low nutrient grain slop that is then
all right, because there's a whole bunch of subsidies on corn. There's a whole bunch of subsidies on
to the point that it's like really not that profitable in the US to make people broccoli or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, it's really easy to take this corn and process it and add some MSG and make it hyper palatable. And your kind of manufacturing demand and hacking our evolution in a lot of ways with these foods.
And it's amazing that people can that the transportation costs and the industrialization yield so many efficiencies that it's more effective and more profitable for the food system to be shipping in, even just getting back to the question of meat, styrofoam containers of chicken breast from thousands of miles away than it would be to have a farm. I mean, obviously, in the middle of a city like Sydney, you're not going to have farms, but, where my in-laws live in rural New Hampshire, when my father-in-law was growing up, there were farms, and you would go and you would get eggs from a farm, and there would be when you bought steak, it would come from a cow that you could have driven to, and there were farmers markets. There's none of that now. It's just huge big box stores and supermarkets and people, with massive trolleys going through the fluorescent aisles of Walmart and picking off pieces of flesh that came from the Midwest and that were shipped in refrigerated trucks.
I feel like this guy's a future vegan now. He's too aware of what's going on.
The small farmers who are making food the way people want it to be made are just increasingly being squeezed out by larger and larger mega corporations that get most of the benefits from these subsidies. And you were speaking before about processed food, a thing that
no one still said ultra processed. I can't believe it. I feel like they've come so close.
That I find really baffling about processed food when it comes to the debate around plant-based burgers, let's say, which a lot of people I think it's reasonable to say that this is a highly processed food, and I think that nutrition is hard, but the kind of rule of thumb that all else equal, less processed, good, fair. But the bit that I can't understand is why taking a bunch of grain and additives and turning it into a plant-based burger in a factory, that's ultra-processed food. Taking...
There we go. There we go. Plant-based meat's healthier than meat. Hope he says that.
A bunch of grain and antibiotics and turning it into a chicken in a factory farm, this is not ultra-processed food, even though afterwards, they both go through factories and processing plants. The chicken is genetically engineered. In the US, it's literally bathed in chlorine before it gets to us. These are both, let's be consistent here, folks. These are both ultra-processed foods.
Right. Well, maybe it's not ultra-processed.
Well, yeah, this is a term of art anyway. It's like...
Yes,
like
I know
superfoods doesn't actually.
Yeah.
True. Thank you, Aidan. It's fucking made up by someone to sell books.
But no, I mean that also comes back to the funny way that people think about lab-grown meat. A lot of people have an ick factor when it comes to the idea. Oh, I wouldn't want to eat meat that was,
Some people really take the ultra-processed idea super seriously. I don't know what's going on with my fucking video feed, by the way. Some people take the ultra-processed thing so seriously. It's how do you not feel silly saying it even? It's just a fucking silly term. And a silly concept and a silly idea, and doesn't map onto healthiness.
A chicken breast grown in a lab, a chicken nugget that was cured, that was cured in a petri dish from stem cells or something. This is disgusting. This is like Frankenfoods. But if they actually saw the conditions of the chickens and the way that they're killed and slaughtered and all the blood and the guts and the shit and everything.
No more natural.
Well, yeah. I mean, even if it were natural, it's certainly not less icky.
Yeah.
Like a clean, sterile lab producing my food, I would rather that than the hellscape of an abattoir.
Personally, sign me up for the cultivated meat, but I understand a lot of people do have the sick factor, and I think that's fine because I do think that the future world where we solve this looks like a combination of more humanely raised animals, more plants, and some of these alternatives.
Right. Any other donations that you want to get to that you want to think about?
Well, I mean, on the topic of, I think I haven't really painted the picture of just how impactful donations are. Compared to diet change, because...
All right, this is the bit we needed in the Patrick Race-Ruff debate. This is the bit we needed. Come on, let's hear it.
The thing is, we built a calculator that allows you to plug in your diet, and it will tell you how much you would need to donate to do an equivalent amount of good to basically boycotting factory farming altogether. And for the average omnivorous person in like the Anglophone West, so like the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK stuff, $23 a month, US dollars a month. This is like the price of a Netflix subscription. And that means then that if you donate more, you're now doing more good. Because the thing about diet change is you can only help as many animals as you would have eaten, but there's no theoretical limit on the amount of good you can do through donating to the right charities. And I stress the right charities because most charities suck. Strong opinion, most charities suck, but there are good ones out there.
Yes, that's also an important point to make because I think a lot of people are jaded and disillusioned about the whole, about all charities.
Yes.
I mean, if you talk to people who don't donate to charity, their excuse is never that it is bad to do good to other, to be nice to other people or to support causes that you believe in. It's always that some dictator is going to get it, some bureaucracy is going to end up squirreling it away, only a fraction of a penny is going to end up making it to the right place. And even then, is it going to do any good in the long run? It might alleviate something in the short term, but cause more problems down the road. Who even knows where it's going? And so what is your yardstick of it working?
I mean, I think when it comes to charity, my view is that you don't work until proven otherwise, because fundamentally, the incentive structure in charities are entirely different to a business. If you're a business, you get money from your customers. If you're not serving your customers, theoretically, they stop giving you money, you go out of business. You have a built-in feedback loop. Whereas when it comes to charity, the person you're supposed to be helping, the beneficiary, is different to the place you get your funding from. And so it's possible to, on one hand, be not serving your beneficiary for years, but be great at finding.
I feel like I say this almost word for word. We must have got this from the same place, or he's got it from me, or I've got it from him. Yeah, that's absolutely right. The beneficiary is not the same as the person who pays you, so it can be just completely severed in that way.
Fundraising and bringing in the money, and you can survive forever. Or on the other hand, to be great at serving the beneficiary and be really horrible at communicating that you're doing that and how you're doing that, and so not getting any funding.
Yeah, right.
So you don't have this built-in feedback loop of revenue and profit, so you have to build it yourself. You have to measure, does this work? And so that's why looking at track records is really important, and looking at the Humane League, for example, I mentioned them. how much have they spent on these corporate campaigns over the past decade? How many commitments have they scored as a result? And let's not even assume that they caused it entirely. Like, let's say, like, well, how many of them would have happened anyway? Or maybe they're just speeding up progress. Let's say they only speed.
Nice, Oggy. Best way to understand the terms ultra-process and process through concept of simulacra. They have no connection to reality. Yeah, that feels about right.
It up by 5 years.
It's like people kind of have the intuition that they know what it means. They think they know what it means. They think it's meaningful. But alas,
It still looks unbelievably cost effective.
Right.
So that's how I try and think about it. Can I keep ranting about charity?
Please.
Yeah. Because like, it sounds unbelievably cheap. Like the 85 cents to free chicken from a cage, that's not even the most staggering number. I mean, you this morning moderated a debate about shrimp and one of the charities that we support that stuns shrimp before death, and they can stun 1,500 shrimp per dollar per year. That's
and just
nuts.
to clarify for people, if people are like saying,
What are you
what the
talking
hell,
about?
shrimp? So we eat billions of shrimp, or prawns as Australians.
440 billion farmed a year.
Right, 440,000 million a year. Just think of the quantity that is.
4 times more than humans have ever existed.
Right. And presumably that's more than any other animal that we commonly eat. So it's like this massive holocaust of shrimp. And the point is that we do all of these things like we crush the female's eyes because that makes her more fertile. We don't know how we discovered this, but...
I shouldn't laugh. It's just such an absurd
weird
notion,
isn't it?
it?
They crush the female's eyes to get more eggs.
Yes.
For some weird reason that I don't understand. And they don't bother killing them humanely. They just throw them on ice and they flap
If you're
around
lucky on ice,
suffocate.
and they slowly suffocate.
If you're unlucky, what do they do?
No ice. The ice, basically, depending on the temperature of the ice, it can make it better. But if it's not cold enough, then now you're just... If it's cold enough, it numbs you,
right?
And that's helpful.
Right.
If it's not cold enough, then now you're just freezing and suffocating,
right? Right. And so you can stun them with
an electrical stunner,
right?
Some sci-fi stuff.
Is that in the water? Do you stun them in water?
No, you take them out of the water and run them through this stunning machine. I can show you some footage later. It's quite cool actually, and you can stun 1,500 shrimp per dollar per year. Very, very, very cost effective. And the reason that it is so cheap to help animals is basically because this problem is just so neglected. The low-hanging fruit has not been picked because globally, less money goes to fixing factory farming each year than
Yeah, kind of same, Oggy. It doesn't seem that intuitively appealing to me. And we've seen a little bit of empirical criticism of the shrimp stuff as well. Yeah, I agree. It's not. I don't know. Then I'm suspicious of that because the thinking is that they're intuitively not very sympathetic, and so I think, well, do I just have that attitude because they don't look cute or something like that, which. Obviously, that's not what you want to be basing your ethics on. But I think it's reasonable to think they're probably less conscious, less sentient than, a cow or a pig. That's
Harvard is spent on renovating a single building. It's less money than McDonald's receives in revenue in a week. Like, it's pitiful amounts of money up against a $2 trillion industry.
But then, the other side of that is that there's so many more of them that you can help. For a given amount of money, that even if they are less conscious, how many less conscious experiences would equate to a more conscious experience? There could be some calculations done around that.
And so people often talk about this like David versus Goliath battle, but that really undersells it, right? Because like I did the math. If David's a normal dude, and this is the charities working to fix factory farming, and Goliath is the industry he's up against, then Goliath is so tall that the Earth's atmosphere only goes up to his belly button. That's the David and Goliath you got to imagine. And yet, David is scoring some wins with barely any resources. So just imagine what we could do if we doubled that.
Right.
I mentioned the thing about offsetting your diet with $23 a month. If 0.3% of the US population did this, that would double the amount of money going to fix this issue. So it really wouldn't take a lot of people making this really easy change to completely tilt the scales. And I said we've already gone from like 5% cage-free to 45% in a decade with nothing. Imagine what we could be doing. This is why I think this is actually really a hopeful story.
Right, right. And so it's almost like a carbon offset where, you're buying your flight and it offers you to pay $17 to...
It is one of those things where it's actually quite difficult to put into words the scale that we could be talking about here. Like doubling the budget of the animal movement. You almost need to just stop after saying it and go, let that sink in, right? Like imagine if you doubled your household budget next year. Like how much more you could achieve of the stuff that you want to do. Doubling the animal movement's budget would be absolutely game-changing. With 0.3% of the US population, he said, that's mental. There's so much potential in this strategy. I'm a big fan of this approach overall. Evolutionary too far away, so it is a complete gamble to assume they have anything comparable to my consciousness. Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to think about that, isn't it? What comparable to my level of consciousness? Yeah.
Offset the carbon, and presumably nobody clicks on it because you're like, is it actually going to offset the carbon, or is it going to go into some complicated, carbon trading system that some huckster in Indonesia has set up where, he's just carved out a whole bunch of rainforest on a map and paid someone to...
It's never going to get cut down anyway. And
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Now
Now he's saying that you can own a part of it or something. And then my $17 is going into a little patch of, 1/1000th of a tree that was never going to get cut down anyway. Who knows? But here you're saying that you can sort of offset the... I mean, it's a bit trickier when you're offsetting the moral... I don't want to say karma again, but like the moral ownership that you have over the pain that you've inflicted on the animals that you're eating, that's not being offset by my donation to a charity that is working to prevent that pain being inflicted in the future. Like for the animals that I'm eating, it still sucks.
Yeah, I think this is a reason why some people find this offsetting notion kind of icky. Other people are like, oh, this is the product I've been looking for all my life,
Yeah, this is going to be the individual versus like overall aggregate offset, right? And this is a lot of vegans have said this on this issue, that it's not possible in principle to offset because they're thinking about the individual animal, which, is a perspective.
Other people find it ick, and I think that's fair.
They're just not thinking about the other animals, right? That's the issue.
Fair enough. I think the question is eating meat and donating morally equivalent to eating meat and not donating? The question is not whether eating meat and donating is morally equivalent to not eating meat at all.
Oh, I see.
The question is whether eating meat and donating is better than eating meat and not donating. And I think that doing some harm and doing an equivalent amount of good is unequivocally better than doing some harm and not doing the equivalent amount of good.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So, like, why wouldn't you be down for it?
Yeah, right.
You don't have to think of it as an offset if you don't like. Think about it as a way to do an amount of good that's commensurate with the amount of harm.
And so do people donate to your charity, FarmKind, and then the funds get dispersed to a bunch of different charities, or do they nominate the specific charities within your portfolio?
Yeah, so you have a portfolio of 6 charities. If you go through the calculator, then it's distributed based on which animal products you're eating in proportion with those animal products. But if you're just making a standard donation, which is what most people choose to do, you can either just go to our impact fund, which is all 6 of our charities, or you can pick an individual charity. Most people just go with the impact fund, I think for 2 reasons. You don't have to like dig into it yourself. That's part of the value we add. We've done the research for you. And the other is I think that you don't have to like pick a winner and say, oh, I think the solution is cultivated meat, or I think the solution is corporate campaigns. It's kind of like an index fund for charities, right. Like support a diverse portfolio that's addressing this problem in a bunch of different ways and all the types of animal that are involved.
Unless you really have it in for shrimp and you don't want to donate to the shrimp stunning.
Yeah. Then don't choose them. Or they're remarkably, the charity that when an individual charity is picked, the shrimp charity is the one that's been picked the most.
Oh, is that right?
Which I never would have expected. When we started this thing, we were like, well, the shrimp thing's really important. It's a part of the problem that has to be addressed. Probably not going to like focus on the shrimp in our comms. But actually, I think it's so weird that it kind of catches people's imaginations.
Yeah,
you know?
so for people who aren't very online, this all may be new to them, the shrimp thing. But this has become a bit of a thing over the past maybe 12 months,
Yes.
18 months or so, where quite a lot of people on Substack have been sort of wrestling with the moral question of our relationship to shrimp, because it is quite evocative when you think about how many of them there are and like how badly. So presumably they can feel pain. They're obviously not very sophisticated, so you don't have the problems that you're running into with the pigs in a crate and missing their young.
Yes.
Let's not assume that they're highly sociable creatures or whatever, but they're a little living thingy. It's got a brain, it's got nerves, like, yeah, so satisfaction when it's a happy little shrimp floating around, probably. Pain and discomfort and agony when it's being ripped apart alive, probably, or suffocating, probably. And the question of like, should we factor that into our moral considerations at all has come up as people are saying, like, the scale of that industry is just worth thinking about and worth saying, do we care at all about whether or not we're inflicting masses and masses of pain on lots of tiny, very simple creatures, or because they're so simple, are we just going to be like, fuck them, I got bigger fish to fry?
And then if
Literally
we do
bigger
care
fish
about
to
them,
fry.
then we have to, how do we make trade-offs? There was like one of the posts that went viral was like, would you, like it was saying, yes, you should save like a Google shrimp rather than saving a human life, for example. Sparked outrage on the internet, you know? And it's not,
Google meaning an almost infinite number.
yeah, not Google,
right.
the company.
Yeah, if you could
10,000
save
employees or whatever.
Right. If you could save thousands of trillions of shrimp versus one human.
I think the number was 10 to 100. That many shrimp. Many, basically.
Right.
Should you do that over saving a life? And I don't think we need to actually have an opinion on the matter, because the question, like, I think this is the thing that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast and haven't done anything about this issue before might be contemplating. Like, but there are so many issues that are competing for my attention. How do I pick? You know, like, can I really take this one off? And I'm so sympathetic to that, like, because I feel the weight of all of these issues that we need to solve, and we do just have finite money, finite time, finite like moral energy, right? But I mean, my view is simply that we should be distributing our resources amongst the world's most pressing problems in rough proportion with like how big the problems are and how easily we can use our money to solve them. And when you look at how little animal welfare and factory farming is getting, I would say we're not getting that right, because this is a giant issue that we can solve. And like, I've spoken in like absolute terms about how little money it gets, but like this might bring it to life even more. In the US, the last data I saw on this was 2021. 3% of donations went to a category called environment and animals. I'm not sure why those two are lumped together. Within that, as you can expect, environment dwarfs animals. And then in the little sliver that animals get, companion animals like cats and dogs, shelters for those, I think it's 95% goes to them. I think is it maybe 2% to lab animals and 3% to farmed animals. So it's like a sliver of a sliver of a sliver. I'm not telling you to not support these other issues. They matter too. But clearly this is not getting enough when we can double it if like 0.3% of the US population pays $23 a month. So, I mean,
well, I will tell you to not, so like if you are supporting like a dog or cat shelter, that is, sorry, deranged and crazy when you think about the amount of good that money could do to absolutely equivalent sentient creatures. By
True, absolutely based.
Donating it to like you're literally complicit in the torture and killing of many animals that are very similar to cats and dogs, and you're putting scarce funds towards like a few homeless dogs. But you didn't say that. I mean, so you don't have to worry about the backlash.
I mean, it's also kind of harsh to be like harder on the people that are doing something for some animals than the people that are doing nothing for any animals.
True.
But I mean, yeah, if you do care about animals, it's worth considering this, because, like, you know, hate to single anybody out, there's a beloved UK charity called Battersea Dog Shelter, and according to their own website, if I recall correctly, it's something like $3,000 to house an animal for a year, and you can just help many thousands of animals, farmed animals, arguably a lot more with that same amount.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to do one over the other, but like you should at least consider doing both.
Yeah, right.
Well, you kind of do have to do one over the other in that case, though, right? We've all got limited money that we can donate.
It's also, I mean, you said if you love animals. I'm not even sure it's a prerequisite to love animals. And perhaps we can wrap up with how you backed into veganism in the first place and why people should care at all about this issue. For me, it's actually not an emotional thing about loving animals. It's much more of just a philosophical and rational conclusion that seems inescapable to me, which is that if we are animals and we evolve from other animals, it's quite likely that the experience of being other species, especially ones that are very similar to us, like other primates, for example, resembles being us with slightly different tool-making abilities and slightly different levels of communication and planning. And if you turn back the pages of the book of evolution from my parents to their parents to their parents to their parents to something that looks a bit like a chimpanzee and goes a bit further back and back and back, there's obviously some continuity, and it's unlikely that the ability to have really, really awful experiences that feel truly like the devil is, is present because you're being so badly treated.
Yeah.
That wasn't inserted into the evolutionary line somewhere with a sharp delineation. There's obviously different experiences that different animals can have that are astonishingly, staggeringly traumatizing and painful, and others that are the way that they live in the wild.
Absolutely. We should expect that pain would be something that evolved really quite early, because it's pretty helpful to be able to detect noxious things in your environment and avoid them.
Yeah.
So I think we should expect probably like the precautionary principles suggest that we should assume, I would think that animals are, or treat them as if they are sentient, even when they're things like shrimp. When they don't have a central nervous system at all, let's say, like a clam or something like that, or they don't have neurons like a plant, then I think we
don't have to worry about the clams and the oysters.
I would say so.
I mean, and even if you don't want to take the train all the way to Shrimp Town, at least mammals. I mean, it's obvious that and I guess birds, but it's obvious.
Don't forget birds.
It's obvious that the birds and the mammals that we eat,
we just have an abundance of evidence. The scientific consensus is clear.
Horrible time.
Yeah, I think to deny that is to deny the science, basically. Yeah, you're right. You don't have to love animals, because if you think that...
Didn't stop Paul Wood. Still not sure if animals are suffering on factory farms, that guy. I don't know. I think in most cases, no.
Torture and suffering are bad, then that should be sufficient. Even if you don't care about that, if you're like, you know what? I'm human supremacist all the way. Anything that's not a human doesn't matter. We barely touched on the public health issues, and then there's also the environmental issues. This is just like not a sustainable way to produce our food, when like 80% of our agricultural land is producing animal products, and yet that's only 37% of our protein, 17% of our calories. This is wasteful. It's 50% of climate emissions. There's a lot more I could rattle off about, like deforestation, just like toxic pollution, effects on biodiversity. If you're an environmentalist, you should care about this issue.
Right. But you don't have to be an environmentalist. You don't have to be an animal lover. You don't even have to object to the killing of animals for meat. You just have to think that something is broken when the only consideration is how cheap a pound of their flesh can be, with no regard to their experience of life.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting we like go back in time to a previous system, although, as I say, the system is less than 100 years old. But it is now, it came into existence at a time when maybe it was meeting some present needs. Our needs have changed. Our concerns have changed. Our challenges have changed. Think about global warming. So we need to move forward, not backwards, to a new system that's fit for purpose. And it's really not that hard to do if we just give it less than the tiniest fraction of the tiniest fraction of the tiniest fraction of our resources.
Forwards, not backwards, upwards, not sideways.
twirling
towards freedom.
Exactly.
Aidan, thanks for being on Uncomfortable Conversations.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Well, there you go. That was pretty good. Think I kind of could have told you most of what was going to happen in that conversation, which is a good sign that I'm getting familiar with the theory of change. And I'm going to be speaking to some of the FarmCline team next week, so I'll be doing some more thinking about how exactly that conversation's going to go. But I have some good questions lined up for them. That's going to be a good one. But I'm going to call it there, guys. It's gone midnight for me, so I'm getting to bed. Thanks for watching with me. I appreciate you guys for being here and for being in chat. And I will be back to stream probably over the weekend. We'll see. We'll see. I appreciate you guys. Have a good night and take care.